Hey guys. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Was in RWBY. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 15. Water release, water dragon bullet, water release, great waterfall, and spiraling sphere. Phrasing is perfect, diction is on point, and enunciation was perfect. So my question for you, Mr. Uzumaki, is this: how are you so easily able to fluently speak a language archaeologists and historians, who have studied it for decades, struggle to even read? Professor Panathenea questioned. Sitting amidst the devastation Naruto had unleashed only a scant few minutes ago to destroy the stone golem that had previously barred their entrance into Yuzu, the two professors gazed at the blonde heatedly while his teammates wondered how he would handle this. They knew full well that outside of them and Team RWBY, he wasn't exactly keen on going around and telling everyone that he was pretty much a living relic from a time long gone. For Naruto, well, he supposed the story that he had originally told to his friends would suffice. The only reason he had told them the truth was because he felt they deserved to know it after everything he had dragged them through. He owed no such thing to the two professors, much less anybody else. Back in my home village of Konoha, it was the language we all spoke. For us it wasn't a dead language, Naruto casually responded. Olive narrowed her eyes hearing his response. Sure, he had answered her question, but he had done so without actually revealing anything, dodging the question almost entirely. However, she knew that trying to press the matter would only end up with them on tense terms, something that would be detrimental to the mission. Nodding, the brunette glanced at the sky before speaking. Well, we've got two choices. Set up camp here and head through the tunnel there tomorrow morning, or try and make it through tonight, and hopefully find a spot to camp in the village itself. Sparing a glance at the sky to see it painted in the waning light of a sun that had begun its trek back down below the horizon, Naruto nodded. I say we set up camp here. If we wait till tomorrow, it'll just give us more time to explore the village. Nora let out a sigh of relief before collapsing on her back, eyes already closed. Night time. Shaking her head with a bemused smile on her face, Pira spoke up. Not yet, Nora, we still have to set up our actual camp. A frustrated whine was her only response. Seeing as how Naruto's jutsu had pretty much excavated out a flat area devoid of grass, or much of anything really, the group elected to set up camp on the spot. The two professors shrugged off their own rather hefty backpacks, and began to unfurl their camping supplies. However, their eyes widened comically when each member of Team NNPR unfurled a scroll and laid their hands on it. 4 simultaneous puffs of smoke later, and there were now 4 tents perfectly set up. Nora was quick to scramble into her own pink and white tent, snores coming from it a few seconds later. Naruto tossed most of his weapons along with his jacket into the tent before sitting down and setting up a small grill. Pira copied the actions of her captain, coming back out of her tent with her hair undone and the bronze-armored pieces of her outfit missing. Ren did the same, taking up a spot to his captain's left and assuming a meditative position as Pira joined them. Looking up, Naruto's sweat dropped upon seeing the owlishly blinking professors. I have 2 more if you want. The two simply nod, catching the tossed scrolls with curious eyes. Seeing that neither knew what to do with the items, Naruto spoke up. Unfurl it, and lay your hands on the symbols, then push some of your aura into the scroll. Doesn't need a lot. After 2 puffs of smoke, the professors found themselves seated opposite the 3 still conscious members of Team NNPR as the blonde captain of the team cooked up a small number of fish. After the long day they just had, no one complained about the rather simple meal. After the meal, Rin and the professors ventured into their own tents to catch up on some much-needed rest. Having sealed away the dishes and grill, Naruto peacefully gazed up at the star-filled night sky, Pira happily joining him. For a few minutes either said anything, more than content and comfortable with the other to not feel the need for words. Curiosity eventually got the better of her though, Pira turning to stare into the almost ethereal sapphires of her captain. How does it feel? Tearing his gaze away from the view, Naruto replied with a genuine smile. Great. I feel like I'm home. I can't really say exactly how or why, but just being here makes me feel like I'm stronger, like I could do anything. Even accessing Sage Mode is easy. While she was overjoyed to hear the happiness that saturated the voice of her friend, Pira couldn't resist the questions that leapt into her mind, always eager to learn more about Naruto. What's Sage Mode? It's a technique that was taught to me by the toads, the same ones my godfather learned it from, the blonde replied. Of course, without the context, the mental image of a younger Naruto being taught by croaking toads sent Pira into a fit of giggles. Toads? Realizing that his partner probably thought he meant regular toads, Naruto joined her in the laughter. No, not normal toads. Getting out his last few chuckles, Naruto continued. During the shinobi era there was these things called summoning contracts. Each contract was for a certain group of animals like the toads, dogs, and even slugs. But these animals weren't exactly normal. They were all capable of speech and using chakra, like any human being. So everybody had these contracts and could summon these animals? Shaking his head, the Jinchuriki responded. No. As far as I know, most of the summon clans had a specific test they gave to people. If you didn't pass the test, you weren't allowed to summon any member of that clan. Seeing Pira nodding that she understood, he continued. Well, my godfather had signed a contract with the clan of toads who lived on Mt. Mayaboku. At a certain point, if the toads deemed you ready, they would have you undergo sage training. My godfather did it, and so did I, though the toads told me I was better at it than that old perv. How could they tell who was better at it? Pira asked curiously, feeling like she was a young girl back in a classroom. Though this topic was far more interesting than anything they had taught at Sanctum. Well, sage mode is a sort of state you can only enter when you've learned how to draw out the chakra of nature and balance it with your own. If you allow it to overtake you, you turn to stone. The more balance there is between you and nature, the harder it is to tell that you're in sage mode. Because he was aligned with the toads, anytime he used it, my godfather would grow webs on his hands and feet and look more like a big toad. When I do it, the only change is usually to my eyes. Naruto lectured. Intrigued by it all, Pira asked the inevitable. Can I see it? Shrugging, Naruto closed his eyes and went through the mental process of feeling out for the nature chakra that practically saturated the very air. Being so abundant, it took all of a second or so before he opened his eyes, revealing the slit honey-colored eyes of his now fox-aligned sage mode. Having spent so much time around him, Pira knew that Naruto's eyes were highly expressive. Normally they were bright pools of oceanic blue, emitting a warmth that spoke of his natural inclination to being kind and open with almost everyone. Then there was that cold glacial blue that only appeared when Naruto was being serious. Of course, when the blonde was being especially mischievous, they took on an almost electric quality, sparking with his ideas no doubt. The eyes she was now looking into, while almost completely different from what she was used to, were still as expressive as ever. The almost amber coloring gave off waves and waves of warmth and gentle serenity accompanied by a depth that spoke of countless ages of wisdom that no one below the age of 100 should be capable of. However, just below the surface of that gentle kindness was power in awe-inspiring levels, the power to decimate whole landscapes and reshape them on a mere whim. It was the power of a raging storm as it poured down rain and lightning, the power of fierce winds as they cut into the earth, the power of the sea as it slammed into a coast and reshaped it, the power of nature. Staring into the slit eyes of her captain, Pira understood why it was called Sage Mode. Naruto had welcomed nature into his body, and in thanks for giving it a physical avatar to show its might, nature was giving him the rights to use its strength and wisdom as he saw fit. When the honey coloring receded and gave way to the sapphire blues she knew so well, Pira couldn't help herself. What does Sage Mode do for you? It boosts my physical strength to some pretty insane levels. I'm faster, more durable, and can analyze things at a faster rate. It also makes it a lot easier to control my chakra and shape it, Naruto casually replied. Satisfied with the answer, Pira smiled. It's a little unfair how you just keep getting stronger like this. How are me, Nora, and Ren supposed to catch up? Laughing at the somewhat teasing tone, Naruto grinned. You should have seen some of the stuff others could do. Tsunade could take a guy's head off with a flick of her finger. In her prime she was able to shatter mountains with a punch. Then there was Kaka-sensei, who was known to have copied over 1,000 jutsu. My friend Gaara could control sand like nothing. Hearing the reminiscent tone in his voice as her friend recalled some of the powerful ninja he had encountered and befriended, Pira could only smile warmly. Wanting to know more about the people who had so impacted her captain and helped to mold him into the person he was today, she inquired. Tsunade? Who was she? Naruto's grin fell, only to be replaced with a genuine smile of love. As the minutes passed and the animals of the night went about their lives, the two teens enjoyed the other's company, Naruto regaling his red-haired teammate and friend with tales of his adventures as a shinobi. How he had turned a psychotic mass murderer Jinchuriki into his brother in all but blood. How he had turned a drunkard and gambling-addicted Sannin lost in the sorrows of past failings into not only the fifth Hokage of Konoha, but a mother figure as well. The forming of Team 7 and the bumpy road the three preteens had endured, only for it to all fall apart. And of course, one of, if not the, most pivotal moment of his shinobi career, the moment that had shaped and given birth to his personal creed, his Nindo. The meeting with Haku, a young woman who shared a past of suffering and loneliness that mirrored his own, and the words she had left him with. Watery blue eyes stared into the night sky as a rueful smile crossed his face. She told me that a person only becomes truly strong when they have someone to protect. After that I stopped wanting to be Hokage for the recognition. I wanted to be Hokage so I could protect my precious people. No words were spoken for a moment, Naruto lost in his own memories while Pira took it all in. And for the second time in a day, Pira did something that surprised even the most surprising shinobi, the red-haired huntress, to be wrapped her arms around his midriff and laid her head on his shoulder. Not expecting the action, the blonde shinobi instantly stiffened, his whiskered cheeks heating up in a fierce blush, not daring to look down. Unknown to him, the young woman who was the cause for his highly nervous state was blushing equally as hard and feeling just as awkward. Despite all that though, Pira felt as if she needed to do this. She had seen the glances Blake shot Naruto when she thought no one was looking. She saw the way Cinder was all but offering herself up to him. Of course there was also Yang and Coco, but she was rather confident that both weren't romantically interested in the blonde, only enjoying the rather funny reactions Naruto had to their flirting. Some would claim that realizing that you had a crush on or were in love with someone would be some sort of great epiphany. A sort of life-changing event. Or at least somewhat of a memorable moment. Especially considering the circumstances of the situation. For the red-haired teen it was more of a duh moment. Being so distanced from the rest of her peers, Pira didn't really have the chance to come into puberty and adjust to those blossoming feelings one felt around their sexual preference. She was instead busy training and growing stronger and becoming a sort of celebrity. At some point she had all but accepted the fact that she would be separate from most of her peers, placed on a pedestal due to her fame and skill. The day of initiation for Beacon arrived and it seemed it would be more of the same, Weiss-Schnee, heiress to one of the richest and most powerful families in Remnant, asking her to be her partner. That notion was tossed on its head though when she heard someone talking after having landed in the Emerald Forest. She was surprised when her reflexes, honed from years of training in combat, had her barely bringing up her shield in time to block a thrown knife. Stumbling upon the cheery blonde, whom she had earlier noted to be quite attractive and funny, she was further surprised when instead of adoration or even recognition said teen instead regarded her like a complete stranger. He didn't ask for her autograph. He didn't stare at her in a way that made her feel naked and uncomfortable. He simply treated her like a friendly stranger. From there it was a surprising series of events that lead her to discovering that he was also quite strong and a rather capable leader. Forming Team NPR with him and two others who treated her like anyone else only added to her happiness. She had friends now. But Naruto would have a special place above the others. He was her partner. He was the first person she confided her worries and insecurities in. And now she was realizing he was her first real crush, possibly even first love. Naruto found himself deeply confused, not just by Pira's actions as of late, but the actions of Blake and even Cinder. He knew his strengths and weaknesses, and one of said weak points was his inability to really comprehend the feelings others had towards him. His childhood had only shown him hatred and disgust. Making friends and gaining those he deemed his precious people had begun to open his eyes to the fact that there was a wide gambit of emotions that people were capable of, but the more complex to him feelings like lust, affection, and anything that wasn't friendship, familial love, or indifference were all new concepts to him. As such, he couldn't really understand the actions of the aforementioned females. They couldn't possibly like him. Like that, could they? He knew that he wasn't exactly ugly or even ill-mannered enough to scare girls away. Heck, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and even Shizen would often offhandedly comment that should he want to, finding women to help him repopulate the Uzumaki clan wouldn't be all that difficult. But there was just no way someone as beautiful, talented, and coveted like Pira could see him in that way, right? She was a celebrity with many people, male and female, clamoring over themselves to even have a shot with her. He should know, he had seen the fan mail. Blake, while not of celebrity status, was just as attractive in her own way, and he had seen a number of students at Beacon throwing glances in her direction every so often. Cinder was, well, there was no way around it, she was downright sexy. The sway in her shapely hips, her piercing amber eyes, and that husky lilt to her voice. Point was that all three females were more than capable of having their pick of the crop, so to speak. In Naruto's mind, the thought that such catches would have an interest in being anything more than friends was alien. Kami, you are such a dumbass sometimes. Naruto's eye twitched, hearing the exasperation that dripped from his partner's voice. Before he could form some kind of rebuttal, a cough caught his and Pira's attention. As one, they turned their heads to see the head of Professor Panathenea peeking out from her tent. As cute and romantic as this whole thing is, need I remind you that we do still have a mission to accomplish? Please get some sleep so we may be properly prepared for the amount of travel we have ahead of us. With her piece said, the professor retreated back into her tent, leaving two heavily blushing teens. Separating themselves, they refused to make any sort of eye contact. Falling back on one of his nervous tics running the back of his head, Naruto awkwardly chuckled. Professor's right. We better get some rest. Pira said nothing, far too embarrassed to actually form a coherent sentence, settling on a simple nod. Without a word more, the two made for their respective tents, their thoughts a whirlwind and their emotions just as flurried. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, bathing the world in its warmth and light, an anxious Naruto stared into the darkened tunnel, his team and the two professors standing behind him. Bublek seemed just as excited about the coming venture, though for hugely different reasons. Of course it was Professor Panathenea who asked the obvious. I don't think any of us here are a faunus, so I hope you have a plan for us to get through this dark tunnel without bumping into every wall. Rolling his eyes, Naruto didn't bother with a verbal reply, instead placing his hand on one of the walls. A quick pulse of chakra, a bloodied finger, and a swipe later, the tunnel was lit up with glowing red seals in the shape of the Uzumaki swirl. If I may ask, why do you bite your finger and use your blood to activate these seals? Bublek asked. It was clear from the practiced ease and casual use of seals that the blonde teen was at least far more knowledgeable in the art than any other person currently alive. While the spastic teacher was also interested in the why of that, he was far more interested in the how of the seals. This whole mission had brought out his inner explorer and historian, igniting his love of all things ancient and historical. Blood seals. They can be key to a certain person, a certain group of people, or anyone of a certain family. In this case, these seals and probably all of the seals in the village need the blood of an Uzumaki to unlock them. Naruto replied casually. Seeing that there would be no more questions, Naruto ventured into the tunnel, the others following him. Seeing how paranoid the clan had been about even the entrance into the tunnel, the group all expected the tunnel itself to be full of traps or be some sort of winding maze that would leave them lost and hungry. They were highly surprised when they emerged out into the light of day without running into any sort of traps or maze. However, any relief they may have had was washed away when they laid eyes on the actual village, what was left of it. Buildings lay in rubble, vines and plant life consuming some structures, shrines barren and dilapidated. Looking down, Naruto could see the skeletons of his clansmen in a similar state, the flesh picked clean by the scavengers that now called the island home. He had thought he would be prepared for the sight. He had read the first entries of his mother's diary, detailing the cruel fate that had met their clan. Tsunade had explained to him many times the unfortunate fate of the once proud Uzumaki. Looking at it, the destruction of his clan's home and the skeletons of his family had Naruto shaking, fists clenched so tightly that blood began to drip from his hands. Rage. Disgust. It was all he could feel, knowing that an army comprised of shinobi from Kumo, IWA, and Kiri had marched onto this land and desecrated it, slaughtering his family because of petty fear. It wasn't for revenge. It wasn't for a mission. It was shameless murder out of jealousy, greed, and insecurity. Standing at his side, Pira was both terrified and worried when she saw Naruto's eyes begin to bleed into a dark crimson, his whisker marks growing darker and more noticeable, a vicious snarl crossing his face. For a moment she had a hard time reconciling the person before her and the goofy blonde she held dear to her. Both Rin and Nora had flashbacks to their first mission as the feeling of that suffocating miasmic power began to grow. The image of a cackling Kurama as he incinerated a decades-old Grim in a blazing pyre leaping to the forefront of their minds. Fear began to grip their hearts as the phantom of that memory turned its piercing red eyes on them, staring into their souls. Even the two experienced professors began to shake imperceptibly, fingers slowly inching towards their weapons as the feeling of hate began to coat them, choking them like it was a physical force. Before he could give in to the hatred that burned like a black flame, a gentle hand on his shoulder drew his attention. Turning, he stared into green emeralds, swimming with equal parts fear and worry. It was the former emotion that caused him to quickly pull back on the chakra he had been unconsciously releasing. The 4 subsequent sighs of relief weighed even heavier on him. Unable to bear the gaze of his closest friend, Naruto turned away. Uncaring of the eyes watching him, the Jinchuriki took a few steps forward and brought his hands up into a familiar seal. A puff of smoke later revealed a few dozen clones of the blonde. Search the village for the skeletons of our clan and start working on giving them a proper burial. If you find any skeletons tied to a hideate from Kumo, Kiri, or IWA, gather them elsewhere but don't bury them, they'll be dealt with later. Their commands issued, the clones leapt off to begin their mission. Not wanting to face his friends and teammates, Naruto spoke up, keeping his back to them. That big tower over there is probably the clan head's tower. I'll start my search there. Feel free to start wherever you want. If you need something unlocked, find one of my clones. Without a word more, the blonde was gone in a burst of speed. Para made to follow him, but a hand on her shoulder stopped her from doing so. Turning back, angry that someone would stop her from trying to help her friend, the redhead defiantly stared Panathenea down. Shaking her head, the professor spoke. Don't. I know you're worried about him, but right now he needs to be left alone with his thoughts. Not only is he feeling angry about the state of his clan's ancestral home, but he's also ashamed of the way he reacted in front of us. Seeing you will only make that worse. The others were highly surprised when Pyrrha yanked her shoulder out of the older woman's grasp and glared at her, a look no one would have thought the emerald-eyed teen to be capable of. No, he doesn't need to be alone. He's been alone most of his life, and being alone now isn't what he needs. He needs friends. He needs people who care about him. You do what you want, but I'm going to go find him. Far too shocked by the usually calm and gentle redhead's outburst, no one moved fast enough to stop her when she broke into a dead sprint, making for the only standing structure. Oblek was the first to regain his sense and turned to address the 2 other members of Team NNPR. What did she mean? I, like most others, find myself in the dark about Mr. Uzumaki's past. Ren shook his head. We only know bits and pieces. The only people who Naruto's actually spoken to about his past are Pyrrha and Blake from Team RWBY, and they are very tight-lipped about what he's told them. Actually, came the quiet whisper of a certain hammer wielder. The other 3 turned to see Nora fidgeting with her hands and looking surprisingly shy. It was by accident, I promise. But I was looking for Naruto so he could help me with some training when I overheard him and Pyrrha talking. I got curious and hid. Pyrrha asked him something about someone named Jiraiya, and he told her something like he was the father he never had. That was all that needed to be said as the others finally connected the dots. It was Olive who said what they had all just now realized. He was an orphan. Sighing, the brunette professor continued, For now let's hope Ms. Nikos can help him and leave them be. We'll start heading towards the tower ourselves so we can regroup. If you see anything interesting, pick it up, and if we bump into one of his clones, we'll have it help us. If it's a room or building, make a note of it so we can find it later. As the 2 professors lead the march forward, Nora timidly asked, Was it wrong run? Smiling at the childlike innocence of his longtime friend, the raven-haired teen replied, No. But we should let Naruto know. Nodding with a smile, the 2 followed after their teachers. Lungs burning as they furiously pumped air through her body, Pyrrha had only one person on her mind. Fear gripped her heart as she pushed her body to move faster, to quickly get to the person who had been at the center of her thoughts as of late. The person who was the first to treat her like she was just a normal person, who didn't hold her at arm's length or try and use her for her fame. She partially blamed herself for this. He had told her and the others what he was, why he had been hunted by a group of frighteningly powerful terrorists. He had told her how it felt, the power that could so easily turn him into a slathering beast intent on destroying whatever and whoever he deemed as a threat. He had confessed to her the horror he felt when he lost control of that power and brought harm to those close to him. And yet she had reacted to it like some powerless little girl, not the skilled and talented warrior she had trained herself to be, and by doing so she had acted like those that had shunned him and left him to cry as a child, unloved and unwanted. Shame, fear, and sadness swirled around her as the redhead burst through the doors of large tower that sat imposingly in the middle of the ruined village. Emerald green eyes watered as she bounded up the winding staircase, frantically trying to find her wayward partner. Coming to the top floor where two large oaken doors bearing the Uzumaki crest, Pyrrha rushed through the double doors, finding herself in a large office with scrolls and seals covering the walls. Sitting at the desk that sat in the middle of the room was the blonde she had been searching for, an ornate headband grasped in his hands. The sound of the large doors slamming open catching his attention, Naruto was surprised when he looked up to see a teary-eyed Pyrrha standing in the doorway. Before he could even make a sound, the young woman was already leaping across the room to grapple him in a tight hug, sending them both to the floor. Taken aback by the sudden action, Naruto could do nothing but return the hug as his friend held on to him like he was her only lifeline. After a few minutes of nothing but silence, Naruto decided to ask the obvious. "What's going on, Pyrrha-chan?" The redhead wiped away the few tears that had managed to fall. "I was worried about you." In response, Naruto quirked a brow. "Worried about me? Why?" Fisting the blonde's black shirt, Pyrrha replied. "I saw the look in your eyes after that. I saw how you looked and I needed to let you know that I don't care and that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I was scared of you. I'm sorry that I'm not strong enough to help you. I'm sorry I'm weak." Naruto furrowed his brows in confusion. "What in the world are you talking about? You're one of the strongest people I know. Heck, if it wasn't for my jutsu and stuff, you'd be kicking my butt all over the place. Besides that, you being scared is only natural. Even I'm still scared of it." Hearing the Jinchuriki's own admission of fear surprised Pyrrha. "You're scared of it? Why?" Looking off to the side, Naruto's eyes gained a far-off glaze to them. "I'm scared of what I could become if I lose control. One little slip-up is all it takes for that power to take over. When it happens, it's hard for me to tell who's who. The last time it happened, I almost destroyed what was left of my own village, the same place I was trying to protect." The deep, resounding voice of a certain kitsune jumped into the conversation. "And that is to be expected. The kid's father was rather foolish and sealed only half of my power into him, while he took the other half with him into the belly of the god of death. The half that was left with Naruto was my negative half, the part of me fueled by rage and hatred. Being that I am pretty much sentient chakra, my power responds accordingly, meaning that each time the kid here would draw on my power, he was subjected to a chakra that was corrosive even to him, eating away at his body and mind. It's only due to his Uzumaki genes and sheer stubbornness that he wasn't torn apart by it." Now this left Pyrrha and even Naruto highly confused, the blonde voicing the question. "Wait, if that's the case, then how come it's so much easier to use it now? I only feel that whole rage and hatred thing when I go above 4 tails." Kurama nodded. "And that's because, like I've said before, your father was foolish. Baka didn't know that as a Biju I have a link to chakra as a whole and can draw from pretty much any source to replenish myself. In any other host it would have taken years for me to even begin reforming my other half, but being stuck in an Uzumaki who would later become a sage sped up the process. Hell, being here on Yuzu where chakra still saturates the air is speeding along the process even faster now." "Wait. Is that why you had me start doing chakra control exercises again?" Naruto questioned. Laying his head on his paws, Kurama lazily waved his tail around. While it's true that you have yet to reach full maturity, with as often as you use the Rasengan technique, which is among the highest forms of shape manipulation and therefore a highly advanced control technique, would have been enough to keep your control from being shot to hell." Seeing the indignant look on his container's face, the Biju continued. "However, because of the seal filtering some of my chakra to you, chakra that is now becoming even more potent as I get closer to being whole again, your chakra is still growing at a rate that occasional use of the Rasengan alone would not be nearly enough to keep up your control." The blonde shinobi childishly pouted. Pyrrha was the one to speak up next. "You were using the past tense to describe what would happen when he used your chakra." "Why?" Kurama grinned. "Notice that, did you? Glad someone did, unlike this dumbass." Ignoring his container's indignant cry at the jab to his intellect, the chakra beast continued. "As I become closer and closer to being full, my darker half becomes more balanced out, meaning that my chakra becomes less corrosive to use. Once I'm back to my old self, the Gaki can freely draw upon my chakra without worry. On the other hand, since he's as linked to the chakra as I am, if he were to draw upon it while angered or anything, the chakra would respond in kind." Naruto grinned, excited at the prospect of having even more chakra to draw upon. If he could so carelessly use it now, he could only imagine what he could do with even more. Add that to his growing repertoire of jutsu, and he would be a ninjutsu monster above even Kaka-sensei. The former shinobi was shaken from his thoughts of being even more badass than he already was, when Kurama raised himself up and stretched out. Now, either you two actually put that position to use or we continue exploring Yuzu. The two teens raised a brow before turning to see what the kitsune was talking about. Cheeks instantly heated up as they took in the position they were currently in. With Naruto laid out on his back, and Pira straddling him, the image presented wasn't exactly innocent. It didn't help that Naruto's hands had somehow ended up on the bare skin of the redhead's thighs while her own hands were splayed out on his chest. As cognitive thought came back to the two, Pira quickly leapt off her friend and captain while said blonde quickly rose to his feet and began dusting himself off in a vain attempt to hide his own blush. A few minutes of awkward shuffling and silence later and Pira's eyes were drawn to the headband that now lay at her feet, having no doubt been thrown when she launched her surprise hug. Bending down to pick it up, the huntress in training marveled at the craftsmanship put into it. The dark navy blue cloth was smooth and soft to the touch, yet seemed far more durable than most materials. Her hands brushed over the smooth metal plate, dipping into the grooves that had been carved out to form what she knew to be the symbol of the Uzumaki clan. Underneath that, and dotting the rest of the dark gray plate, were numerous smaller swirls, no doubt representative of the whirlpools that gave Uzushio its name. The fact that neither the plate nor the cloth which it sat on were only slightly dusty after millennia of being exposed to the elements, and time itself spoke of the level of care and skill that had been used to make the item. Pira's attention was drawn to Naruto as he spoke. That's the hideate for the head of the Uzumaki clan. So only clan heads wore these? Pira asked curiously. Grabbing the small scroll that sat at the belt of his pants, Naruto grabbed it and unfurled it, looking for a specific item. Finding it amidst the various other items stored in the scroll, after clearing away the white smoke, Naruto held out a headband of a similar style to the one Pira held in her hands. However, the black cloth of his headband was heavily torn and frayed while the plate was scratched in several places and was dented in numerous spots as well. Instead of the Uzumaki swirl, there was what looked like a leaf engraved in the center of the metal plate. It was clear that the item had seen better days. No, all shinobi are issued one by their village after graduating their academy and becoming genin. It's a way to identify which village you belong to. Even Roguenin wore one, but theirs always have a slash through the village symbol, showing that they had cut ties with their home. Naruto explained. Nodding in understanding, Pira asked another question. I thought that the heads of a shinobi village were called kages? Like your village had the Hokage, right? Were their headbands special like this one? Smiling at the fact that his friend had actually remembered that little tidbit, Naruto replied, well, actually only the leaders of the 5 major hidden villages could be considered kages. They wore some pretty awesome-looking robes and a hat that had a kanji on it. Giggling at the childish description of a kage's outfit, Pira walked up to her captain with the headband in hand. For a moment she looked at him with a critical eye, like she was trying to solve some sort of puzzle. Shifting awkwardly under her scrutiny, Naruto was about to ask what she was doing before she brought the headband up to his forehead. The blonde was all but forced to look into the rather bountiful cleavage of his friend as she tiptoed while securing the item with a knot. Giving a final tug to tighten the cloth, Pira admired her work with a smile before furrowing her brows, seemingly unsatisfied with something. With a snap of her fingers, the invincible girl ran her hands through Naruto's blonde locks, freeing some of the longer strands, allowing them to settle and fall over the headband, covering it in some places. Taking a look at her work, Pira had to admit that the headband just seemed to fit, like Naruto should have one on at all times. Now that she was looking at him with it on, she just couldn't imagine him without one. For his part, Naruto felt somehow right again, as if something had finally clicked into place. Satisfied with his new headband, Naruto turned and resumed his seat behind the desk, rifling through the drawers. Well, I've already found a few jutsu scrolls I'm keeping, but not much else, which is kind of surprising. Pira was meanwhile looking at the various portraits that hung from the wall off to the side, no doubt depicting the past leaders of the village. It was interesting for her to see that one trait all of them shared, be they male or female, was that they all had striking red hair not unlike her own. This brought up an interesting point. If the trait appeared to be so dominant, why then was Naruto blonde with blue eyes? Naruto? Do all Uzumakis have red hair? Pira asked. Turning to see that she was inspecting the portraits of the clan leaders of old, he nodded. Yeah. It was one of the ways you could tell if someone was an Uzumaki. They all have red hair, are talented in Fuinjutsu, are super durable, and are usually pretty stubborn and outspoken. Threading her fingers through her hair, Pyrrha curiously turned to face Naruto. Do you think I could be a descendant of the Uzumaki? Naruto was ready to shoot the idea down, seeing as how he, Tsunade, and Nagato had been among the last of the clan, and none of them had children. However, the more he thought about it, he realized he could be wrong. His mom's diary and Tsunade had said that some of the clan had managed to escape the fall of Yuzu and spread out across the countries. In fact, now that he thought about it, he was pretty sure he had met quite a few of other Uzumaki kids. There was that chick who had joined up with Sasuke who had a healing factor to rival his own, that girl who could use chakra chains like his mom, and the Godame Mizukage, fifth water shadow, Mei was possibly also a distant relative. The more he thought about it, the more likely it became. Pyrrha did indeed have that Uzumaki shade of red hair, the fighting spirit of a warrior that almost all of his clan had, and she was pretty durable. Squinting his eyes in thought, Naruto pondered aloud. It's possible. You have a lot of the traits, but they're just not as prominent. Kurama once again made his presence known, intrigued by the possibility of Pyrrha being a descendant of the Uzumaki clan. However, that could be due to how watered down the genes have become. We are a few millennia in the future after all. It's also possible that due to her lack of chakra to fuel said traits, they've become dormant. Before they could further discuss what was now looking to be the highly likely chance of Pyrrha being at least distantly related to the Uzumaki, the impressive doors once more opened to reveal the rest of the mission team, Professor Panathenea leading the group. Without further notice, RWBY barged in and was scurrying around the room, frantically scribbling away. Interesting. No other expedition party was capable of entering this office before. I assume it was kept sealed by a similar seal to the one at the secret entrance? Naruto raised a brow seeing the energetic professor move at speeds that would make his dad jealous, but replied nonetheless. Sort of. This one was more particular though and needed the blood and chakra of the one who shoulders the weight of responsibility. Originally the blonde had thought the seal meant a Jinchuriki when it talked of responsibility, but Kurama was quick to remind him that the clan and no doubt the seal protecting the office had been around for far longer than any Jinchuriki, barring the first Jinchuriki, the Rikudo, of course. That meant that the seal was talking of another type of responsibility which Kurama seemed to think was the responsibility of leading the clan and the village. Because the seal opened for Naruto, this could only mean that Kushina and by extension he were of the main Uzumaki line. Subsequently this meant he was closer in relation to Mito and Tsunade than he originally thought. So the only one who could unlock this office were the leaders? How did you manage to unlock it then? Olive questioned suspiciously. Naruto shrugged. The Uzumaki clan had a main line, and it was usually from that line that the leader was chosen from. Just means I'm part of that bloodline. Fed up with how coincidental all of it seemed, the young professor questioned. And how did you know that? How did you know about the secret entrance? Ms. Valkyrie told us you were an orphan, so how do you know so much about all of this? If Naruto was offended that Nora had told them he grew up an orphan, he didn't show it, instead settling on raising a brow at the rather eloquent outburst. My mom left me her diary which talked a lot about the clan. A few of the last entries are even written for me, so I could learn about my heritage. My godmother was also distantly related to the Uzumaki, and was more than happy to share what she knew. Effectively cowed, Olive huffed, knowing that she wasn't going to get anywhere. The blonde clearly had an answer for any question she could pose, which she could appreciate. He was being tactical with who he trusted. On the other hand, that alone bothered her. Most huntsmen and huntresses of course had their personal secrets and lives, but not to this extent. With the way he was acting, the teen seemed less like a huntsman in training and more like secret agent, or something. A shriek drew everyone's attention to the window. Coming from the distance, they could all see a large black mass speeding through the air. As it grew closer, it became clear that the black mass was a Nevermore, an old one if its impressive size was anything to go by. What's a Nevermore doing here? They should only be drawn to negativity, and there hasn't been anyone occupying this island for millennia. Panathenea cried out. It took a moment before Kurama and Naruto turned to look at each other, a look of realization crossing their faces. My chakra. Cursing up a storm and ignoring the cries that came from the others, both Naruto and the Biju leapt out the open window. Rushing to the edge, the others saw the blonde scaling the building, headed for the roof. Before the two professors could question how the teen was so easily defying gravity, Pyrrha followed suit and copied her captain's actions, running up the side of the building just as easily thanks to liberal use of her semblance. Turning around, the two huntsmen managed to catch the fleeting forms of Ren and Nora as they made a mad dash for the roof as well. "We really need to learn how to do that, Ren. What is up with these kids?" Naruto glared at the impressive form of the Nevermore as it made its towards the last standing building in Yuzu. Mind already running a mile a minute, he barely shifted his eyes as he saw Pira join him, Milo and Akko in hand. A few seconds later, Ren and Nora joined them, completing the team. "So what's the plan, Captain?" Nora exuberantly asked. Speeding through a set of hand seals, Naruto inhaled before calling out, "Katon, carrier endin!" Exhaling, Naruto unleashed a stream of flames that burned white hot. The flames began to change and mold into something, growing larger and larger until it eventually took on the form of the mythic beast. The dragon of fire roared, a guttural and booming sound, as its burning eyes glared at the approaching Nevermore. Without any warning, the infernal beast surged forward, crossing the sky with its maw open to engulf the large, bird-like Grim. However, to everyone's surprise, the Grim pulled back and began to flap its massive wings, kicking up winds that managed to reach them yards away. That wasn't the surprising part, though. What threw Team NNPR for a loop was when blades of wind formed as the Nevermore continued to flap its wings, those same blades slicing into the dragon of flames and chopping it up until it was naught but embers that were smothered by the force of the winds. That was Wind Nature Chakra. A Grim just used a jutsu. Naruto's mind raced. It made sense, the Grim were like the Biju, constructs of chakra, therefore, like the Biju, they could use that chakra to produce their own version of jutsu. That windbag port did say that as they grow older, Grim grows stronger and even gain intelligence, Kurama supplied. But neither of those Beowulfs we met in that village used the jutsu. Not even that Deathstalker during initiation used chakra, and that thing was ancient. That just means they were not as old as we believed. The Deathstalker may have been the offspring of the original one that had lived there before it, or merely been another older one that took up that cave as its resting place. Either way, this means that this Nevermore is far older than any Grim we've encountered and has the intelligence and power to back that up. Frowning, Naruto stared down the approaching form of the Nevermore. "Guys, that Grim just used chakra. That attack? It was a jutsu. This thing is old, and very powerful. We're gonna have to pull out all the stops if we want to take this thing down." As he said that, though, Naruto's mind was racing a mile a minute. Katon, Karya Enden wasn't his strongest jutsu, but it wasn't exactly weak either. Add to that the fact that he had funneled a generous amount of chakra to power it, and that just meant the Nevermore was that much stronger to be able to so easily dispel it. There was also the issue that neither he or his teammates were exactly known for their long-range capabilities. Sure, they each had their firearms, but none of them were all that powerful. Ren's SMGs would do nothing but annoy the Grim, Pira's shells might cause some damage, and Nora's rounds were more suited to slow-moving targets, and the Grim had just easily banished one of his strongest ranged jutsu with ease. Close range would be the best option, but with most of Yuzu's buildings laying in ruin, there were no footholds to get them up high enough for that. All in all, it wasn't the most favorable situation. Then again, Naruto was no stranger to having the odds stacked against him. Chapter 17. "Guys, do you trust me?" Naruto asked suddenly. Without hesitation, Pira was the first to reply. "Always." Nora happily nodded. "Yup." Ren raised a brow, but shrugged. "You've given us no reason not to." Their blonde captain grinned mischievously. "Then here goes nothing." Without any kind of warning, a clone of the Jinchuriki grabbed each of them by the arm, and a quick spin and a chakra-enhanced toss later saw the whole of Team NNPR soaring through the air, headed straight for the Nevermore. "We!" Nora cried as the wind howled around them, childishly indulging herself. The other members of the team smiled at her antics before growing serious, the searing red eyes of the Grim growing closer. "Nora! Give that thing a good one!" Naruto cried over the winds. Not giving a verbal reply, the hammer wielder fired off a round to speed her up. The Grim opened its mouth expecting the team to simply fly into its gullet. Aiming Magnaheld down, Nora fired another round, sharply changing her course and placing her above the Nevermore. Another shot had her plowing Magnaheld straight into the top part of the Grim's skull, halting its flight and making it give out a shriek of pain. Ren was the second to have been launched, and was the next to arrive at the Grim. Pulling out Stormflower, the long-haired teen twisted his body and stabbed the bladed handles of his twin firearms into the armored back of the Nevermore. Still having a bit of momentum left over from his flight courtesy of Air Naruto, Rin gouged out 2 trails into the ancient Grimm's back, exposing the flesh underneath. Coming to a stop, he twirled Storm Flower and began to unleash a flurry of bullets and aura-enhanced kicks into the creature's back, creating more openings in the bone-like substance. The bird-like Grimm was not at all amused by this, and was about to give a flap of its wings to rid itself of the 2 pests on it before its eyes caught the shock of red currently headed for it. Pyrrha, the shock of red, landed feet first on the head of the Grimm. Milo in its spear form and wielded with 2 hands was viciously stabbed in between the Grimm's eyes in an attempt to lobotomize the creature. The thick white armor that covered most of its head and portions of its body protected it from being left brain dead, but Pyrrha had managed to force her weapon far enough past the armor to at least pierce into flesh, the Nevermore in even more pain now and even more intent on ridding itself of the pests. Odama Rasengan, Big Ball Spiraling Sphere! A large basketball-sized orb of pure chakra ground into the armor that had already been weakened thanks to Ren's efforts. Chunks of the stuff flew away while most of it was shredded into a fine powder under the drilling nature of the overpowered Rasengan. Enraged by the ants that had managed to penetrate its defenses, the Nevermore gave a great shriek that traveled across the desolate island, those within earshot of the cry wincing as their eardrums began to painfully vibrate. Flapping its wings, the massive bird spun around, sending each member of Team NPR flying off its body. Now rid of the little bugs, the Nevermore gave a victorious screech and opened its wings to their full span, blotting out the light of the sun due to its massive size and wingspan. Each member of Team NPR were busy gaining back their bearings after having landed on solid ground once more. The 4 teens stared at the circling form of the Grimm, a menacing shadow that was clearly intent on burying them 6 feet under. Pyrrha, any ideas? Naruto asked. It was clear his original plan of combating the Nevermore in the air had been rather foolish. They had managed to at least slightly wound it and its armor, but clearly aerial combat wasn't exactly their forte, especially considering none of them could fly. We have to bring it down here, or at least get it to fly low enough for us to actually cause some damage. Pyrrha was forced to cut her speech short in order to escape the blades of wind that carved their way into where Team NPR had previously been standing. The 4 teens continued to run, dodging the onslaught of razor-sharp winds, trying in vain to formulate a plan to land some sort of decisive blow on the Nevermore. Of course, seeing as how the thing was clearly more than happy to maintain its aerial advantage and keep them on the move by peppering them with its chakra-based attacks, plans were in short supply. Of course, though Naruto may not be as good as Pyrrha at planning ahead, he was a genius when it came to making up plans on the fly. Futon Renkuden, Wind Release, Drilling Air Bullet. Pumped full of enough chakra to make the jutsu as large as a small car, Naruto channeled the wind-natured chakra through Hino Ishi and swung the staff, the condensed ball of air aimed straight at the Nevermore. Feeling the distortion in the wind and seeing how its blades were being torn to shreds upon impacting with the superior jutsu, the ancient Grimm decided to halt its own attack in favor of dodging. Tucking black feathered wings in, the Nevermore performed a rather graceful spin to avoid being pummeled by the jutsu. Coming out of the maneuver, the Grimm turned hateful red eyes upon the blonde insect who had dared to attack it. Seeing that he now had the monstrous bird's attention, Naruto began to sprint away from the rest of his team, headed for the river that bisected the village. I'll keep it distracted. You guys figure out how we can take this bird down. Pyrrha wanted to argue, but knew that logically speaking, this was the best route for them. Out of the 4 of them, Naruto was the best equipped to at least hold off the Grimm. She wasn't sure if he could actually kill it himself, even with all of his power-ups and jutsu, but those same abilities meant he could at least keep its attention long enough for the rest of them to gather their wits. Biting her lip in frustration, Pyrrha racked her brain for anything that could possibly help them defeat this monster. Kurama! Can't you just take his thing down with a Baijidama, tailed beast ball, or something? Naruto mentally shouted as he was forced to dodge a hail of black feathers twice his size. The Biju grunted in frustration. I could, but we don't know if or how the seals that protect the village will react. They could perceive it as an attack and attempt to stop it, but a Baijidama strong enough to take this bird down could possibly overload the seals, and I'm sure the last thing you want is to send this place sky high. Cursing, Naruto rolled to the side in order to dodge yet another barrage of wind blades. He could just activate either the Biju cloak or Senin Moto and smash an empowered Raisin Shuriken into the thing's face. But seeing as how it had taken a Odama Rasengan and only lost part of its armor, he didn't think a Raisin Shuriken even powered by Kurama Chakra or Nature Chakra would be enough to fell the monster. Besides that, the fallout from the attack, even high up in the air, would still cause far too much collateral for his liking. Funneling chakra through his shikujo, Naruto turned and launched a Katan Gokakyu no Jutsu at the Nevermore, causing it to slow down in order to avoid the blazing ball of flames and giving Naruto some much-needed breathing room. How did this thing even get past the seals? Remember, these things are made of nature energy. The seals would mistake it for an animal or something, Kurama grunted out. With a burst of chakra, Naruto propelled himself out above the river, narrowly dodging the Nevermore's imitation jutsu. With practiced ease, Naruto used chakra to stick to the surface of the river, staring defiantly into the burning hate-filled eyes of the ancient Grim. Done with running, the blonde half-blood Uzumaki stood his ground, and as the gargantuan Nevermore pulled its wings back, he sped through a chain of seals, his fingers a blur. Staring the other in the eye, the two foes unleashed their attacks. Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu, Water Release, Water Dragon Missile! Water from the river below him began to rise up in tendrils, coalescing into one mass above the blonde's head. The ball of water writhed like a living organism, becoming streamlined and soon forming into the ferocious visage of a dragon. With a watery growl, the beast of surged forth, rushing to meet the gale force winds the Nevermore had kicked up. The two elements, one a wall of wind and the other a mythic beast of water, met high above even the buildings and battled for dominance. For a second it seemed as if the two would implode, being made of equal strength and power. However, with another flap of its wings, the Nevermore reinforced its own attack with enough power to shred through the draconian jutsu, sending water down as if it were raining. From the brief veil of mist that had resulted from the two techniques clashing, Naruto emerged like a blonde torpedo, a feral grin on his face and a Rasengan held in each hand. Clones, perfect launching gear, and a helpful extra set of hands for forming the more taxing jutsu. The Nevermore let loose a shriek of power, not in the least bothered by what it perceived to be a small nuisance at best. With a simple swing of one of its wings, the Grim backhanded Naruto and sent him hurtling back down into the river with a splash. To ensure its victory, it flapped its wings and sent down another hail of its blade-like feathers. Following that, the ancient monster formed another wall of wind, turning the already deadly pitch-black feathers into massive missiles capable of piercing even the thickest walls. Futon de Tapa, Wind Release, Great Breakthrough! The onslaught of feathers was met by a funnel of winds so ferocious that it stripped them of the black barbs and sent the hollowed spines harmlessly clattering to the ground. Two Narutos emerged from the river, both already speeding through a sequence of hand seals. Suetun, Mizurappa, Water Release, Water Trumpet. Futon, Kazakiri no Jutsu, Wind Release, Wind Cutter Technique. Kombijutsu, Fusui Rappa no Jutsu, Collaboration Technique, Wind Water Wild Wave Technique. Empowered by the cutting blades of wind, the concussive stream of water hit its mark and was quickly tearing through the bone-like armor of the Grim, going so far as to cause the creature to bleed heavily. Enraged and in pain, the Nevermore let out a horrifying shriek that echoed across the island. The ancient Grim, however, proved that it had indeed survived for countless decades and was not going to go down so easily. Flapping its right wing, the only one not currently being torn to shreds by Naruto's Kombijutsu, it gave a mighty flap and sent down blades of wind, one cutting through the clone causing it to disperse, and the others forcing Naruto to cancel his jutsu lest he become mincemeat. Burning red eyes gazed down at the blonde nuisance. The Grim's body was covered in splotches of red, while the underside of its body and left wing were almost entirely stripped of feathers, and even skin, even more red painting it. Whatever bone armor it had before was now gone, leaving only a heavily fractured and near crumbling head piece. Yet still, despite its lack of feathers and heavily wounded state, the Nevermore continued to maintain its current altitude, no doubt thanks to generous use of wind-natured chakra. However, it soon forsook that advantage in favor of speeding down towards a currently heavily panting Naruto. The blonde cursed mentally. It had been quite a while since he had to toss around such high-powered jutsu like that, and even though he had more than enough stamina and chakra to keep going, his body was attempting to readjust to having such large volumes of chakra expelled in such a short span of time. As the Grim was upon him, beak prepared to skewer him, a pink blur slammed into the wounded Nevermore's side with the force of a train, knocking it off course. Surprised, Naruto was quick to grab his teammate and haul her up, seeing as how she was unable to walk on water like him. Nora, supported by her captain, puffed out her cheeks. "You can walk on water too! How do you not know how to pull a rabbit out of a hat?" Laughing at Nora's oddness, even in the face of the current situation, Naruto grinned. "After this is all over, I'll see if I can learn how to do that." Naruto was highly surprised when Pira began to make her way over to them, her and Rin standing atop a large sheet of metal, at a pretty quick pace. It seemed that her mastery over her semblance was getting better and better with each day if she could so easily keep both herself and Rin afloat on an item that would otherwise quickly sink to the river floor. Taking stock of Naruto's haggard appearance, his jacket torn in a number of places and small leftover blood from wounds that had no doubt already healed, Pira began to fret. "Are you gonna be alright?" Naruto grinned. "Yeah, I'll be fine. I'm just hoping you came up with some way to bring this bird down." Smiling at the blonde's exuberance, Pira turned a hardened gaze at the recovering figure of the Nevermore. "I was originally going to see if you could use either Sage Mode or something to take it down, but now that its armor is gone, I think we can have an easier time of getting hits in." As if to prove her point, the Grim lost a few feet in altitude and looked to be struggling to barely keep itself afloat, all the while glaring at the teens. The area where Nora had hit a few minutes ago was already bruising and looked to be bleeding as well. Without its armor to protect it, the Nevermore was far more vulnerable. Without the need for seals, Naruto summoned 2 more clones, each grabbing one of his teammates. Pushing off the surface of the river as if it were solid ground, Team N and PR regrouped, keeping an eye on the quickly ascending form of the Nevermore. It seemed to have realized that keeping the 4 teens at a distance was the best way to come out of this fight alive. "I think our shells will be enough to at least weaken it even more, so let's pepper it," Pira called out as she shifted Milo into its rifle form. Nora nodded and collapsed Magnahal back down into its grenade launcher shape. Rin simply brandished the twin pistols of Stormflower. Realizing that her captain's only long-range capabilities were his jutsu, the redhead continued. Naruto, I guess we'll take it from here." Naruto cracked a mischievous grin. "What? Did you forget I left High No Ishi with the achievement hunters?" The other 3 teens turned to watch as Naruto pulled back on the handle of High No Ishi. However, instead of breaking off or having the hidden blade pulled out, the ring portion of the staff lowered, forming an almost 90-degree angle. Pulsing chakra through the conductive metal and simultaneously squeezing the leather-wrapped bar that vertically crossed through the ring, an unmistakable bang echoed. They all watched as whatever projectile Naruto had fired from High No Ishi clipped the Nevermore on the cheek, enraging the avian Grim even further. Sweat dropping, Naruto nervously chuckled. "Guess I could use some practice aiming, any?" The others laughed before beginning the rain of bullets, seeing as how Rin and Pira's firearms were quicker on firing than either Nora or Naruto's weapon, but lacked the sheer power of the grenade launcher, and what appeared to be staff-turned-sniper-class gun. The 2 took on the rose formation and steered the Nevermore into the disaster pair's line of fire. Combined, Naruto and Nora were indeed living up to their formation's name. Already the Nevermore had suffered even more damage due to the sheer explosive power of Magnahal's rounds, leaving it with even more burned feathers and scorch marks, while the piercing rounds of High No Ishi tore through even bone. Pira's insane marksmanship had Milo's fire-enhanced rounds doing even more damage, while Ren's Stormflower had been outfitted with lightning-tight dust to not only increase firing speed, but also give them a little extra shock. At its wit's end, the Nevermore coated the entirety of its body in a shroud of wind-natured chakra and with a mighty flap, unleashed a veritable typhoon upon Uzushio. Wide-eyed, Naruto jumped in front of his teammates, and as quick as was possible, gathered the necessary energy to not only activate Senin Moto, but to also form his signature Raisin Shuriken. With a mighty effort, Naruto slammed his own futon jutsu into the approaching whirlwind, wind blades grinding against wind blades in a fight for dominance. The screeching roar of the drill-like nature of the elemental Rasengan fighting against the typhoon that spun counter to it was deafening, and the backlash of the 2 high-powered techniques meeting had the other 3 teens on their hands and knees in a bid to keep from being blown away. The once calm waters of the river were gone, replaced by the churning waves of a stormy sea, waves harshly crashing into the shorelines. For all intents and purposes it seemed as if Uzushio had become the battleground for gods, engulfed by the storm that was the backlash of 2 mighty titans meeting on the battlefield. However, Naruto was not a god, and while powerful, his own technique was a volatile double-edged sword, considering he hadn't taken the time to properly form it, far too busy attempting to save his friends. Even perfected, the Raisin Shuriken was not a jutsu meant to be used so close quarters, and Naruto was being reminded of that fact as the cutting winds of his own technique bit into his arm, rending flesh from bone and painfully tearing into his chakra system, while the rest of his body was being punished by the harsh winds of the typhoon that raged only inches from his face. Eventually the 2 warring techniques could take no more, and all at once, the 2 techniques imploded. Being in the midst of the 2, Naruto was subject to what felt like a bomb going off on his face. The sheer concussive force of the explosion sent him hurtling into one of the decrepit buildings, causing the already delicate structure to collapse in on him. The rest of Team NNPR was not given a respite of any sort, the Nevermore upon them in a matter of seconds. One wing plowed into Nora, sending her skipping along the ground like a pebble across a river. Before Rin could even react, a massive clawed foot was painfully pinning him to the ground. The long-haired teen screamed in pain as more pressure was applied and his bones began to creak in protest. Seeing her friend and teammate in pain, Pyrrha attempted to at least distract the monstrous avian, but the Grim was done playing. Using its good wing, it sent a wall of wind at Pyrrha, slamming her into the ground, leaving her wide-eyed and breathless. Turning burning red eyes back on the prey currently caught beneath its foot, the Grim seemed intent on taking them out one at a time, starting with Ren. Before it could do so, a ball of flames exploded directly on its face, causing the Grim to give an indignant cry of irritation. Following that, the Nevermore was forced to free Ren when the tendons on its foot were savagely severed by a particularly sharp shield. A blow to the underside of its beak had it stumbling back while piercing gunfire shredded its remaining good wing. "Woblek! Now!" As one, the two professors slammed their respective weapon into the body of the Grim, sending it into the still churning waters of the river. Panting and looking like they had been involved in their own scuffle, Panathenia and Oblek quickly gathered their younger students. Nora looked to have a dislocated shoulder and possibly a slight concussion alongside several bruises and scrapes. Ren's ribs were either heavily bruised or broken, and he was thusly having trouble breathing. Pyrrha had banged her head and back rather painfully, and was having trouble even standing. Naruto was possibly the worst, and the sight of him had Pyrrha choking back tears. His right arm from the hand up to his elbow was shredded, lacerations covering near every inch of his limb, making it look like his arm had been used as a chew toy for a pack of dogs. The rest of his body was just as bad, either covered in cuts ranging from the size of a fingernail to deep trenches that revealed the soft tissue and muscle below. His leg also looked to be either broken or severely sprained after having concrete and other building materials fall on him. What no one questioned was the disappearance of a certain Kitsune. Back inside the confines of the seal, Kurama was fast at work, pumping as much of his chakra into Naruto as was safe to speed along the healing process. "Come on, Gaki, you're not dying on me just yet. You're made of much tougher stuff than that." Everyone watched as steam began to rise from Naruto's wounds, a thin layer of transparent orange chakra covering him like a blanket. As the seconds ticked by, flesh began to knit itself back together, cuts closing, and bones snapping back into place. Eventually the only major damage left was that to Naruto's right arm. Soon though, it too began to heal, however at a much slower pace than any of the other wounds. With a start, Naruto came to, taking a deep breath of air and hissing as he felt the sharp shooting pain of the various wounds that dotted his body. Relieved sighs came in stereo. Taking in the damaged forms of his teammates, Naruto frowned. He had failed to protect his precious people, and they had clearly paid the price. Deciding he would deal with that later, Naruto turned and saw the ruffled appearances of the two professors that had saved them and raised a brow. "What happened to you two?" Oblek turned to where the Nevermore had fallen under the surface of the river. "Unfortunately, our feathered friend did not come without company, and Professor Panathenia and myself felt it prudent to entertain our guests." Pinching the bridge of her nose, the brunette professor spoke. "I cannot believe your stupidity. Trying to fight an old Grim is one thing, but that monster was clearly ancient and beyond any of your capabilities. The fact that you're all still standing, albeit barely, is a testament to your luck." Naruto began to shakily stand up, garnering protests from those around him. Stubbornly, he shook his head. "That thing's not dead yet." Panathenia shook her head. "Look, I highly doubt that thing is coming back, and even if it was still alive, it's going to drown under the river, so it's best to just dash." A piercing shriek caused everyone to turn and stare in horror, as the heavily damaged and mangled form of the Grim broke through the surface of the river, eyes trained on them in fury. Taking a deep inhale, Naruto once more called upon the energy of nature, allowing it to flood and mingle with his body, bringing on the hardly noticeable change of Sennin Moto for the second time. With the aid of nature's soothing chakra, the former shinobi's wounds began to heal at an even faster rate. Twitching one of his fingers as a test, Naruto bit back a growl as pain shot throughout his arm. Despite his own healing factor being aided by Kurama and nature's energy, and his arm looking a lot better than it had, the damage brought on by him using an incomplete Raisin Shuriken was still being fixed. It would probably be a few days until the various nerves and chakra pathways in his arm were properly fixed. Using his good hand, Naruto reached into his now torn and tattered jacket and retrieved a roll of medical bandages. Using his teeth and good hand, he wrapped up the entirety of his right arm from fingers to the elbow. Cracking his neck, Naruto turned his amber eyes to his team. Guys, I think I can take this mangy bird down, but I'm gonna need your help. Despite their own wounds, the other 3 teens nodded firmly. They were a team, and if their friend and captain needed their help, they would do whatever it was, no questions asked. Professors, can you keep it occupied? This may take a while, Naruto said. Knowing that the blonde teen was possibly the best choice to finally take down this grim, Panathenea frowned but nonetheless nodded her assent, Oblique copying her action. In a blur the two were off. Pira, you still got a cartridge of fire dust left? Seeing her nod, Naruto stretched his good arm out, palm facing up. Not a clue how this will go, but I guess no time like the present, right? Can you pour it out into my hand? Not being able to connect the dots, Pira raised a brow but nodded. Ren, you have the best control over your aura out of all of us. I'm gonna need you to form a bubble around the dust as I form my attack. When I say so, let it pop and back up, alright? Seeing where his captain was going with this, Ren nodded and cupped his hands over top Naruto's palm. Finally, it clicked in Pira's head. Naruto planned to combine the dust with his Raisin Shuriken and hopefully deal one final blow. Holding the cartridge of fire-aligned dust in her hand, Pira worriedly stared into the amber eyes of a Senjutsu-empowered Naruto. Isn't there another way? We all saw what that technique did to you when used it without throwing it. Naruto smiled at hearing how worried Pira was. Don't worry, that was my fault. I didn't properly form the shell and paid the price. This time I got it, Tebeo. Signing, but knowing this was possibly their only chance of actually being able to finish off the Grim, Pira poured out the powdered dust into her friend's waiting palm. Backing away, the redhead watched as the now familiar shape of Naruto's signature attack took shape, Ren's bubble of aura keeping the dust safe inside. Ren, now! To her, and almost everyone's surprise as the bubble popped, sparks began to appear as the dust was forced to collide and combust under the dizzying speeds of the chakra ball. The formerly blue-tinted technique quickly began to burn in hues of orange and red. As blades began to form and spin in a familiar shuriken-esque manner, the rest of the team waited for the shriek of chakra grinding against element. They were highly surprised when instead of the high-pitched noise, the roar and crackle of flames grew louder and louder. As the technique fully formed, Naruto shouted, "Professors, back off!" Panting and bedraggled, the 2 professors regrouped with their students. The 2 stared in awe at the sizable shuriken, flames whipping to and fro inside the jutsu, begging to escape their chakra prison. All right, Nora, give me a good toss. Gripping her captain by the back of his tattered jacket, Nora spun in place once, and using the strength granted to her by her semblance sent the blonde soaring through the air like a missile. The Nevermore stared at the approaching blonde missile and rushed to meet the pest head-on, wind chakra turning it into a red and black-colored missile of hate and anger. Streaking through the air, the 2 collided high above Uzushio, unnoticed by Uzushio's defensive seals due to their being almost entirely powered by nature chakra at this point. Senpo, Katon Raisin Shuriken, Sage Art, Fire Release Spiraling Shuriken. Flames licked at the Nevermore as beak met jutsu, Naruto once more subject to the bite of wind as it cut into him. As the 2 elements fought for dominance, it seemed that the 2 titans were of equal match, and would thusly destroy the other. However, the Nevermore had made a grave error. It had thought its wind strong enough to snuff out the flames of the blonde-haired and like it had done to the Dragon of Flames at the start of their battle. This would be its downfall. Powered by Naruto's Sage Mode enhanced chakra and the very nature of what dust was, the flames of this jutsu were far stronger than what most chakra-created fire was capable of being. All at once the blaze of flames asserted its dominance as the superior element, growing in ferocity thanks to the wind provided by the Grim. The now massive conflagration of flames surged forward, devouring the Nevermore in a tomb of blistering heat and fire. Even hundreds of feet away and firmly planted to their positions, the 3 teens and 2 professors could feel the spike in temperature as the jutsu detonated, and yet they paid that little mind, far more entranced as they watched as the very sky itself seemed to catch fire, the aftermath of such a destructive technique replacing the clear blue with vivid hues of red and orange. It was an odd juxtaposition, the raw destructive force that was fire itself resulting in such a beautiful sight while they stood amongst the ruins of a long-dead civilization. They were all forced back into the present as they spotted Naruto's form falling from the sky, unmoving. Despite their wounds, Team NNPR moved as one, ignoring the cries of a protesting Panathenea and breaking into a dead sprint and making for where their captain was headed. With a boost from Nora, Pyrrha managed to scale what remained of a nearby building and catch her friend in a bridal carry. With some help from Ren, the 4 teens managed to make it back down to ground without incident. Laying an unmoving, but conscious Naruto down, his head situated on Pyrrha's lap, the team of 4 collapsed. For a moment no one said anything, their minds still busy going over everything that had just happened. Naruto could only mentally chuckle at the bad luck he had when concerning missions. What was supposed to be some simple historical knowledge dig was turned into him, and his team fighting a Grimm who was so old and powerful that it was capable of using chakra. Unable to hold it in, his mental laugh became an actual laugh, catching his teammates by surprise. It began quietly, but soon Naruto was laughing as if he had just been told the greatest joke ever. Infected by their captain's own laughter, the others couldn't help but to let out their own. Injured but alive, Team NNPR lost themselves in laughter and smiles, having overcome an ordeal that would have pushed even veteran huntsmen to the brink. His right arm still wrapped in bandages, and garbed in a pair of loose-fitting blank pants that fluttered in the wind with a simple white shirt with the Konoha leaf printed on it, Naruto sat and stared out at the countless graves his clones had made. The graves of his clan. However, as he blankly stared out into the horizon, part of him felt some form of catharsis knowing they now had proper graves instead of being left to rot in the elements. The other part of him was deeply saddened as he realized that this was not only what was left of his family and name, but what was left of the shinobi era as a whole. It said something when the last remaining memoir of an age rife with hatred, war, death, and petty jealousy was a battlefield littered with the decaying corpses of not just his clan, but of several other villages, shinobi and kunoichi as well. This is how future generations had remembered them. This would be his friend's only experience and memories with a shinobi village. This was it. A barren wasteland that nature was now fighting to reclaim. He and the others had spent some time wandering the village and collecting a few artifacts, all of which he deemed okay to take, and he had personally found a few keepsakes, a few jutsu scrolls, and a few Fuinjutsu scrolls detailing some of the higher seals, and even still he couldn't wipe away the truth. This is what the shinobi era had amounted to. The horrid state humanity found itself in, fighting against monstrous beasts of nature's making and holed up in a handful of safe zones like Vale, fighting to survive. It was the fault of his era, the fault of Akatsuki no doubt, and the fault of the shinobi villages. Despite his best efforts and the efforts of his friends, the wheel of hatred had kept turning after his departure. A gentle hand on his shoulder roused Naruto from his depressing thoughts. The blonde turned to see the concerned eyes of his partner and friend staring back at him. Behind her stood Nora and Ren, each wearing their own faces of worry. Seeing them, it finally clicked. Even though he had failed to stop it, he and the others had managed to do some good and at least slow the turning wheels of hatred. Humanity now stood united in its efforts to survive, to strive for a better world. Evidently they had taken the best parts of the shinobi era and learned from the mistakes. No longer did they cut themselves off from the other base solely on some lines on a map. No more was there a need for secrecy, lies, and espionage. The only ones who had need of such things were those in the criminal business, and even then the greater good stood as a united front against even them. Neither Grimm nor human would destroy what the people of the last few decades had strived to create, to rebuild from the ashes of the old guard. There were still things to be improved, the relationship between humans and faunas coming to mind, but Naruto would finish what he had started. It may be a few thousand years later, but he would make sure that the dreams of his godfather, of Nagato, of Sarutobi Grandpa Sarutobi, and all of those that had put their faith in him were fully realized. He would end the cycle of hatred once and for all. That was his promise, and as his Nindo his way of life dictated, he would make damn sure it happened, or his name wasn't Naruto Uzumaki, son to Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, Jinchuriki to Kurama the Kyubi no Kitsune, and shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato. Rising to his feet with a burning fire in his eyes, Naruto smiled at his team and gave them a silent nod. For a moment, the others were stunned as they could almost feel the waves of determination and passion that now radiated off of their captain. Peering into his eyes, Ren thought to himself, "It's like he's found a new resolve, a reason to fight. So, this is who you really are, Naruto? Guess me and Nora better start training even harder. Troublesome. If I didn't have a few years of service as a huntsman myself, I probably would have taken off and left you lot after that first big explosion." a grinning pilot remarked as the group of 6 neared the landing site. It had been a few days since the whole Nevermore fiasco, and the team, even Naruto, were more than eager to get back to civilization. The whole first few days had been a whirlwind and left most of them physically and mentally exhausted. Spending a few days rummaging through the rubble and dilapidated buildings had allowed them time to rest and recover, but everyone was sorely missing the creature comforts of Beacon. Stepping onto the plane, the others turned to see Naruto staring out at the island, a distant look in his eyes. Finally, a firm frown set on his face, and he turned to regard his foxy companion. Through a conversation that only the two of them were privy to, they both seemed to reach some sort of agreement. Naruto walked to a seemingly random tree nearby, and they all watched curiously as he bit into his finger and smeared the blood across the tree trunk. A seal briefly lit up before fading away, but that was the only thing of note. Nothing else happened as the blonde boarded the bullhead. Shrugging it off, the pilot continued to go through the necessary checks to make sure they were ready to make the long trip back to Remnant's mainland. "And what was the purpose of that, if you don't mind my asking, Mr. Uzumaki?" Naruto said nothing, merely maintaining a serious, almost sorrowful, frown as he gazed out at the island. As the roar of the engines coming to life spiked, Oblek was ready to ask once more. However, they all got the answer when violent tremors began to shake the island. Panicked, the pilot quickly kicked the aircraft into gear and began to lift off the ground. Looking out either of the machine's open doors, the group watched in horror as the island of Yuzuno Kuni was victim to a massive island-wide quake, the strength of which was quickly destroying what remained of the village as well as fracturing the very island into pieces. Horrified, Panathenea turned to a frowning Naruto and shouted over the roar of the engines. "What did you do?" With a grim sense of finality to his tone, Naruto spoke. "What should have been done already, destroying the last traces of an age of hatred and death." Loud gasps drew the brunette professor's attention back outside, only for her to watch as one of the whirlpools that gave the village and island country its namesake grew in size and begin to consume the island, dragging the entire land mass down into the watery depths below. Beyond furious, Panathenea turned and roared. "And what gave you the right to do that? You've just destroyed hundreds of priceless artifacts. Not only that, you've sabotaged decades of research and learning. That island held the answer to questions that scientists have dedicated their whole lives to. And now all of it is in vain." Naruto met the woman's anger with a cold visage of his own. "What gives me the right? That island is mine to do with as I please by right of birth. I am the sole heir of Uzushio and her secrets, and as such I've decided that her secrets, and the secrets of that era will go where they ought to be, beyond the reach of anyone who would dare try to misuse them." Calming himself with a breath, the Jinchuriki turned away. "Besides, I've allowed you and Professor Oblek to take enough relics and translated journals to satisfy most historians." The huntress was stopped from making another scathing remark by a surprisingly serious Oblek. "Ms. Panathenea, Mr. Uzumaki is correct. As the heir to the clan and village, he held every right to forbid us from even coming here in the first place. However, he instead allowed us to see his ancestral home as well excavate a number of priceless tomes and artifacts, all without asking for anything in return. More than that, he is more than likely right about the secrets. From what we've gleaned, that era was less than pleasant, and I for one do not wish to further explore just how cruel of a world it was. There are just certain things man is not meant to know." Properly cowed, but still far from happy, the brunette woman huffed and turned away, busying herself with something in her pack. Meanwhile, Naruto's teammates, being far more privy to the reality of the world their friend had lived through, couldn't blame him for doing what he had. It was like an attempt to wipe the board clean. He wasn't destroying some monument or something. He was removing what he viewed to be a blight on the world. And they were inclined to agree. They had no problems with Naruto wielding all the power he did. He was Naruto, and that was enough reason to not doubt that he wouldn't use his strength for good. However, they shivered in fear when imagining someone like Torchwick or that woman they had faced on the docks getting a hold of a jutsu scroll or something. A very long and somewhat tense ride later saw a very relieved Team NPR stepping out onto the grounds of Beacon Academy with smiles on their faces. Stretching out his arms behind his head and grinning, Naruto sighed. Feels good to be back. We'll look what the fox dragged in." Turning around, all of Team NPR were greeted by the smiling faces of Team RWBY, a grinning Yang having made the terrible pun. "So, how long has she been working on that one?" Naruto asked teasingly. Giggling at her pouting sister, Ruby Pretend whispered back. "The whole week you've been gone." The two teams shared a good laugh at the expense of the bombshell blonde before the inevitable happened. "What happened to your arm?" Weiss shouted as she took in the bandaged state of the former shinobi's right arm. Luckily, no one questioned why Weiss was the first to notice, far too busy interrogating the now nervous team captain. Oh, you should have seen it. We were shooting at this huge Nevermore that could use wind blades. And then it was all like gra, and made this big tornado. But before it could even get close to us, Naruto was all like, I got this. And then his eyes changed color, and he used that super cool wind swirly Star of Doom thing and stopped it. But he said he messed up and didn't do it right, so his arm got all bleg. Nora animatedly explained to a stunned team RWBY. Wide-eyed, the four girls turned to Rin, expecting him to explain what had actually happened, as was the norm. Said raven-haired teen shrugged. She's not lying this time. You idiot! Was Yang's only warning before she clobbered her fellow blonde with a rather nasty bop on his head. But wait, don't you heal super fast or something? Ruby asked curiously. Still running his head in pain, Naruto spoke. Yeah, but the Raisin Shuriken is a pretty powerful technique. When someone is hit by it, it kinda pops and unleashes a million microscopic blades of wind that tear into the victim. When I first made it, I couldn't really form the shell right, and so I'd end up just as messed up as the person I was using it on. I got it down pat now, but when I used during the battle, it was rush job, so I had to skip some steps to get it up in time. As intriguing as that is, it still doesn't explain why you're still hurt unless this all just happened today or something. Weiss stated. Well, because of how small the blades of wind are, the jutsu actually cuts into my nervous system and chakra network. Kurama says that pretty much recreating my entire arm from the ground up is pretty hard. Naruto explained. Catching on, Blake joined in. So Kurama is pretty much making an entirely new nervous system in your arm? Seeing as how they were relatively alone, said Kitsune decided to speak up. Pretty much. Since the dumbass here has done this before, I have a little practice, and neither his chakra system or nervous system were as damaged as before. Even still, it's probably going to be at least another day or so until he can mold chakra or even use his arm properly without it stinging like a bitch. As the group of teens continued to discuss Team NNPR's foray to Naruto's ancestral home, Professors Panathenia and Oblek were reporting to Ashbin and Glinda. Looking down at the courtyard bellwether where he could see the teens laughing, the headmaster of Beacon succinctly summed up what his employees had told him. So Yuzushio now lays beneath the waves, lost to future generations? Pausing, the silver-haired man seemed to mull over the thought before nodding. A good call. Both of the female professors were shocked at how easily their boss dismissed the fact that a hotbed of archaeological finds and history was so easily lost to them, at the call of someone they considered a child no less. You can't be serious. He had no right, Panathenia argued. Glinda was all too happy to support the younger woman. I must agree. Mr. Uzumaki's actions were irrational, uncalled for, and highly irresponsible. He could not possibly understand what he has cost not just the historical community, but mankind at large. Taking a sip from his ever-present mug, Ashbin calmly replied. I must disagree. I'd say his decision was well within his rights as the proper owner of Yuzushio. Not only that, but it was a call made with wisdom beyond his years. Like Bartholomew has said before, that time of our history as humans was colored with death, war, and an almost unending cycle of hatred. What little we know of that time has been enough to steer us away from repeating the sins of our forefathers, and I fear that any more knowledge will have us falling back on those ways. We will simply have to content ourselves with what we know now and what young Naruto has allowed us to find. Huffing, Panathenia accepted defeat and muttered. If you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make as well as artifacts to inspect. Yes. I have many colleagues that would love to get their hands on the items we've retrieved. Time waits for no one. And without pause, the frazzled green-haired professor was out the door, Olive following at a much more sedate pace. Glinda joined her longtime friend and technical boss in gazing out at the courtyard below as students went about their day. Her eyes were drawn to the ever-growing group of friends that seemed to gravitate towards a certain blonde mystery, the older team CFEY having joined the group. She raised a delicate brow upon seeing the older team captain deliver a resounding slap to the back of Naruto's head. That boy is hiding things. Even you have to admit that he knows far too much about an age that people decades his senior have spent their lives researching. And until he reveals to us why that is, I will do nothing to hinder the boy. Alone he will grow to be a huntsman of great strength and will bring much needed changes to this world of ours. His influence and ties to people like the Schnee heiress, Taeyang's daughters, and even Ms. Nikos, has yielded nothing but good, for both himself as well as them. Have you not noticed? Taking a break to sip his coffee, Ashbin turned to address his friend. Ms. Belladonna is far happier now than she has been since stepping foot in Beacon. He has tempered Ms. Schnee's arrogance and selfish tendencies. His own team has risen far above what has been thought possible for a group of fresh trainees. Glinda, they combated a Grimm that was more than likely older than this very institute, and not only managed to deal a heavy amount of damage without the involvement of our two highly trained and experienced huntsmen, but also did what Bartholomew and Olive could not and defeated it. Turning back to watch as Naruto smiled and laughed alongside his friends. Looking like a normal teenager, Ashbin actually smiled, a small one, but it was a smile all the same. That boy will do great things, that I am sure of. I, for one, cannot wait to see what he does next. A showered and rested team and NPR were all more than happy to embrace the comfort of their beds. Nora was instantly out, Rin quietly following afterwards, after a hug and good night. Pirai joined her teammates in the realm of Morphus. However, Naruto felt the sudden need to fiddle with the scroll he had been given by Beacon upon passing initiation. He had totally forgot about the odd piece of technology, and had only ever used it a small handful of times. However, he had earned the ire of Team RWBY today when they said they had sent a number of messages to said scroll in an attempt to see what was going on with him and his team. When he told them that he had totally forgotten about the thing, he had received another smack upside the head from Yang and a lecture from Weiss on its uses and his lack of responsibility. Going through it and learning how to use the odd combination of his era's tech and this highly advanced era's was somewhat tasking, but he was nothing if not a quick learner. Soon he was navigating through the scroll and its various functions with ease, smiling upon reading the messages he had received. Yang went from casually curious to furious with him, ignoring her, while in contrast her sister went from bubbly to extremely worried. Blake's messages were a rather confusing mix between the two sisters. They started off modest enough, and when she realized he wasn't responding, turned equal parts highly concerned and coldly indifferent. Done with that, Naruto decided to browse the news section to see if they had missed anything important while they were gone. The headline, "Torchwick strikes again, who is his shadowy partner?" had him frowning. Knowing exactly who the article was talking about, Naruto was forced to realize that although Cinder was rather intent on getting him to help her, she wasn't going to simply put a halt on all her plans and wait for him to give her a straight answer. Reading further into the article, the blonde was relieved to find that no one was hurt in the mess, and only a few shipments of dust had been stolen. Enough, even you need to rest, especially if you want me to have your arm in working condition faster, echoed the gruff voice of his Biju partner. Realizing that the mass of chakra was right, Naruto rolled up the scroll and set it on his nightstand, rolling over into a more comfortable position to finally get some much-needed sleep. Chapter 18. Garbed in his usual sleepwear of a tank top and gym shorts, both which bore the symbol of his home village, Naruto found himself enjoying the calm serenity of a late night spent atop one of Beacon's higher structures, a certain raven-haired fauness dressed in her own sleepwear and seated to his right. Their spending time together in such a manner was quickly becoming something of a ritual for them, and neither could complain. Of course, this time was a little different, seeing as how the usually level-headed Blake was glaring daggers at him with her amber eyes. Sweating nervously, Naruto absently wondered if agreeing to meet her was a bad idea after all. Then again, seeing as how he and his team had arrived back from their mission to Yuzu just in time to enjoy the weekend, due to his wounded state he had the options of sitting in his room and going stir-crazy from boredom or actually being able to get out and get some fresh air. Being as hyperactive as he was, he chose the second option. "You are simultaneously the dumbest and smartest person I know," Blake icily commented. Knowing she was referring to his still recovering arm, Naruto could only grin nervously and scratch behind his head. Thanks?" Shaking her head, Blake continued. "Honestly, throwing yourself in front of a tornado with a half-formed technique as your only defense? What were you thinking?" Naruto shrugged carelessly. "I was thinking I had to save my friends. If I didn't do that, then they could have been hurt even worse than before, and as team captain, I can't let that happen." Seeing the conviction in his cerulean orbs, the young cat fauness sighed. She knew Naruto was the type to jump headfirst into any situation regardless of the danger it posed to him if it meant he could protect those close to him. It was something she admired about him, but seeing the bandaged state of his arm reminded her that he wasn't some all-powerful entity. He was human, albeit with a huge chakra construct bound to him, and unique powers, and could be hurt just like her or anyone else. Deciding to steer the conversation away from such morbid thoughts of mortality, Blake turned her gaze back to the starry sky above. So how much longer until you're healed? Ruby and Jan have been getting pretty impatient, and want to have that match with you guys, especially after Ruby heard from Nora about what you did to your weapon. Laughing at the mental image of the younger teen excitedly bouncing around like a bunny on a sugar high, Naruto replied. Kurama said I'd be good to start doing some exercises by tomorrow, so the day after that I should be good as new and ready to kick your butts to Bayo. The two shared a laugh at the cheesiness of Naruto's bravado before allowing a comfortable silence to descend upon them, either feeling a need to speak and simply enjoying the other's presence. Idly, Naruto wondered how some of his pseudo-family would have reacted to seeing him now, quiet and enjoying the peace and quiet of the night alone with a girl. The blonde cracked a smile imagining both Jiraiya and Kakashi cheering him on before Tsunade clobbered the both of them for being perverts. Blake was lost in her own thoughts, worry gnawing at her. Her teammates had become increasingly suspicious that she was hiding something from them, which was the truth, but she had no clue how to approach them. It had been easy with Naruto. He just exuded this aura that made it so easy for you to share your woes and worries. With him, it had all just come tumbling out. Not only that, his own past of being a pariah due to his Jinchuriki status had given them an even ground, which made it even easier. She knew her teammates weren't at all adverse to Faunus and probably wouldn't treat her any differently, evidenced by Naruto's revealing of his Faunus nature, even after learning that was a half-truth and that he was actually a living cage for a being of untold power hadn't changed how they saw him. Sure, they were all a little more than angry that he had lied in the first place, but that was quick to fade after learning why he had done so. Still, the crux of the matter lay with how to start the conversation. Naruto had pretty much been forced to own up to his status each time due to outside circumstances. So far she was lucky that no such thing had happened to her, but a feeling in her gut told her that if she didn't do this on her own, her hand would be forced by something or someone. You know you can always talk to me, right? The soft rumbling tone of Naruto's voice tore Blake from her thoughts. Looking up, she saw warm oceanic orbs calmly staring back. Smiling, she was happy not for the first time to have someone who knew her struggles so well, someone who was willing to help her at her own pace, and not simply throw her into the proverbial deep end. Briefly, she wondered what could have happened had Naruto never been thrown into the future, her present, and joined Beacon. Considering how vital a person Naruto was to the past, the world as she knew it would no doubt have been drastically different. Would the help of someone as strong as Naruto been the key piece to keeping the shinobi era alive? Before her mind could delve into the what-ifs and the whole multiverse theory, Blake voiced her troubles. I want to tell the others, but I don't know how to approach it. Knowing what she meant, Naruto hummed in thought. He could definitely see why it was troubling Blake. Even he could see that Team RWBY was growing closer, as they should, and there would inevitably come a time when she would have to tell her teammates. Her telling them first without being forced to would definitely soften the blow. How did you tell your friends? Blake asked curiously. Naruto laughed nervously. Well, I didn't. They all kinda figured it out for themselves or were told by someone else. The young cat fauna sighed. Well, there goes that. But Blake turned to see Naruto with a huge grin on his face. I know that you're smart, and that Ruby, Yang, and Weiss will still be your friends no matter what. Shizune told me that sometimes you just have to do it, that it's like removing a band-aid. The faster you do it, the less painful it'll be. Allowing a soft chuckle to escape her lips, Blake found herself surprised yet again by the simplistic logic Naruto seemed to use to guide him through life. Sure, part of her knew that it was a rather naive way of thinking, however she also knew that said logic was tempered by his own upbringing and life. Somehow it worked. And right now, that's all that really mattered. Rasengan. Naruto found himself grinning at the destruction caused by his and his father's signature technique. Flexing the fingers and muscles on his right hand, his grin only grew larger. His arm was almost back up to 100%. He had woken up this morning with Kurama telling him that the nerves and chakra pathways in his arm were finally done being fixed/made and that he was clear to use it again. Without a word to his team, he had sped off to the Emerald Forest and got to work getting the arm back up to snuff. A few chakra control exercises later with some stretching and generous use of his signature clone technique, and Naruto was happy to say that it was like he had never viciously mutilated his arm in the first place, unsealing a bottle of water, a few pieces of parchment, a brush, black ink, and a few of the few ninjutsu journals he had collected from Yuzushio, Naruto plopped himself down underneath the shade of a tree. Now it was time to see if his arms still had the dexterity and penmanship needed to draw seals. Dipping the brush into the ink pot, Naruto breathed in and calmed himself, mentally preparing himself for the task ahead. While he wasn't a novice or anything, he knew that despite him gaining back the use of his arm, it had been a few days of not using it, and so it was possible his penmanship had taken a hit in that time. A few storage seals and explosive notes later though, and Naruto was happy to see that wasn't the case at all. Turning to the journal he had randomly picked out, Naruto raised a brow upon seeing the title. Jutsu Sealing. Having been the apprentice to Jiraiya of the Sannin, a world-renowned seals master's only bested by his student who was also Naruto's father, and those of the Uzumaki blood, Naruto was well aware of the ability to seal away even jutsu. Heck, the first time he'd seen it done was when Jiraiya had to seal away the flames of Itachi Uchiha's Amaterasu, Heavenly Illumination, a fire jutsu unique to the Uchiha clan and their Sharingan that was said to be the very flames of hell itself, burning for 7 days and 7 nights. It was also said that the flames could not be extinguished by any means other than the caster willing it. If such a powerful jutsu could be sealed, then so could any other jutsu, right? However, as Naruto began to scan the pages of the journal, he realized that his clan hadn't just come up with a way to seal away any and all jutsu, but how to store it in such a way that it could be used at a later time. Instantly, Naruto's mind began to race through all the possibilities. If he could learn this particular seal, with some tweaking, he could essentially outfit his friends with an arsenal of jutsu that they could unleash if need be. It would be like an insurance policy. If they ever ran into some form of trouble on their own and he wasn't around, it could be their ace in the hole. However, before Naruto went about working on it, a thought struck him. He was trying to make sure that no one else had the same power he did, the same power that had turned the shinobi era into a time of war, greed, and hatred. If he did this, he would be contradicting that. Not only that, if word got out about people other than him being able to cast jutsu, questions would be asked. Either some people would figure out how to manufacture what he was doing, or even go so far as to try and steal it from him. As it was now, if he was the only one capable of being able to cast jutsu, he could simply write it off as it being his semblance like he first had. In that way he would be able to stop people from the get. Semblance were unique, they were the representations of one's own soul. They could not be taught or made. Arg! Why does this have to be so difficult? Naruto shouted aloud, pulling at his hair in frustration. He was by no means a dumb person, he just wasn't smart in the same way that people like Weiss, Ren, and Pira were. He was more of a hands-on, practical knowledge kind of guy. He was more than happy to admit that when it came to philosophical debates and the like, he was all thumbs. That was the kind of stuff he had let people like Shikamaru take care of and worry about. Deciding to save himself the headache and stress, Naruto decided to put those thoughts to the side and focus on something he excelled at, training. Of course, that plan was quickly derailed when a certain bubbly teammate of his suddenly appeared in his face without warning. Surprised by Nora's sudden appearance, Naruto screamed like a little girl and fell on his ass. Grinning and either ignoring or being oblivious to the fact that she had almost given her captain a heart attack at age 17, Nora cheered. "I found you! I found you! I found you!" Gripping his chest, Naruto began to shout at his teammate. "What the heck, Nora? What was that for?" The young woman, currently prancing around her captain, replied in that same cheery voice. "Everyone was looking for you, of course. And since I managed to find you first, Ren promised me we would go to that new pancake house that opened up in Vale." Having finally collected his breath and wits, Naruto sighed. "But that doesn't mean you had to scare me half to death." Nora pouted. "Not my fault you were being all I'm super serious and stuff, like when you found that ring." Naruto couldn't help but sweat drop. "Was I really doing that again?" Stretching out his arms, Naruto began to gather his gear and seal it up. "Well, I guess we should head back now, don't need Yana on my case again." "So what were you working on?" Nora asked curiously as they began the trek back to their dorm. "Something that could let you guys use jutsu like I do," Naruto revealed. He felt no need to lie, she was his teammate and friend and there should be no lies or secrets between them. "Nope." Raising a brow at her answer, Naruto asked. "What?" Nora shrugged her shoulders. "Well, it wouldn't make sense. You're the one who does all that cool breathing fire and stuff. I'd beat 'em up with Magnahild, Rin uses his kung fu stuff, and Pira is all cool. If you gave us those jitsu things it wouldn't be the same. Besides, you already gave us those cool scroll things. I've been able to stash away so many pancakes with them. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at the rather simplistic answer. While it wasn't exactly the epiphany or moral answer he was looking for, it served to remind him that, like him, his teammates weren't the type of people to take handouts or shortcuts. If he gave them access to such a destructive force like jutsu, sure they'd be stronger for it, but it wouldn't be their strength, it would be his. He'd be cheating them out of the pride of knowing that whatever triumphs and victories they got, it would be earned through their own hard work, not because he gave them a scroll that fired off 10 dragons of fire. Smiling, Naruto turned and looked at Nora. It's jutsu, but you're right. It wouldn't be the same, would it? In response, Nora once more invaded his personal space bubble, only to poke him on the chest. Turning, the excitable teen was off and sprint shouting over her shoulder. Tag, you're it! A grin split Naruto's face. Bad idea, Nora! I'm the king of tag! Pretty please, Naruto! Nope. Please, nah. Please, 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 dash. No, 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 and nope. But I just want to touch it. Once. Maybe test it out. You know. The students of Beacon, by now accustomed to the strangeness of teams and NPR and RWBY, paid no mind as the two captains of the aforementioned teams strolled by with their lunch trays, the younger of the two following behind the older one with the look of a child who had been denied a toy. Of course, considering who it was and what it was they were talking about, that wasn't too far from the truth. Seating themselves with the rest of their friends, Yang shook her head upon seeing her younger sister crying crocodile tears. Still pestering you about your weapon, Foxy? Said Whiskered Teen, slurped up the noodles in his mouth before nodding his head. She's persistent, I'll give her that. That's how she got Uncle Crow to teach her how to use a scythe, Yang explained. Taking a sip from her cup, the blonde continued. Kept pestering him with those puppy eyes for almost a week straight before the poor man caved. Why am I still surprised at how childish she can be? Weiss remarked coldly. Naruto raised a brow before grinning mischievously. Kettle me pot. Laughs and giggles erupted from the others as the Shnee heiress glared daggers at the former shinobi. And what's that supposed to mean? The teenage Jinchuriki merely waved his hands in full protest. Ma, no need to get so defensive. I mean, it's not like you pout when things don't go your way or anything, right? The snickering around the table only grew louder while Weiss huffed and turned her head away. I have no idea what you're talking about. Pouting is beneath someone of my stature. I was merely expressing my displeasure with the situation. Not being able to resist the temptation, Blake joined in. By pouting? Instead of responding, the young heiress crossed her arms and turned her head away. HN. Naruto almost choked on his saliva upon hearing that unmistakable sound. As Pira worriedly patted him on the back, Naruto had to stifle the almost automatic urge to cry. Team. Geez, maybe Weiss is related to Sasuke or something. No way anybody, but an Uchiha could HN like that, Naruto concluded, managing to clear his air pathways at last. Brushing off those thoughts, Naruto turned his head upon hearing yet another familiar sound, the click of heels on the polished floors of Beacon's cafeteria. Long raven tresses and burning amber eyes greeted him, and not for the first time, Naruto was confused about how he should feel about seeing Cinder fall. On the one hand, she was a dangerous femme fatale hell-bent on achieving her goal through any means necessary, which was usually cause enough for him to put people on his shit list. However, it was what said goal was that gave him pause. She wasn't bent on something stupid like world domination. No, honestly, what she wanted was something that he could empathize with. Sure, he didn't exactly agree with her methods, but hey, past experience had shown him that his way of doings wasn't without its own faults and stumblings. Naruto screamed out as he felt something poke him in his side. Turning around, he found a Neapolitan waving with a not-so-innocent smile on her face. How the heck do you do that? As the others laughed at his misfortune, the booming voice of his Biju partner echoed in his mind illusions. I thought we were simply allowing our guard to slip the past few times, but now I know for sure that's not the case. I was on full alert, and yet she still managed to get past my senses. I'd watch it. Her semblance seems to be able to allow her to create illusions strong enough to elude even my senses, which should be damn near impossible. While externally, Naruto was childishly pouting, internally his mind was racing a mile a minute. Genjutsu, illusionary techniques, had always been Naruto's weakest point because he simply had way too much damn chakra to control, which was the key point of the art. The more subtle you were with how you were influencing someone, then the harder it was for them to tell they were even in an illusion in the first place. The density and overwhelming amount of chakra he had did not lend to such finesse. On the other side of the coin though, having such massive reserves made it a little easier for him to purge himself of any illusion bar those of the highest quality and power. Even then, since Kurama was both an internal and external force, the Biju could easily break his container out of even the strongest of illusions. However, for Neo to be able to slip past even Kurama's senses meant her semblance allowed her to create some pretty powerful illusions. So where have you four been? As soon as Naruto and his team left, you guys disappeared, Yang commented. Neo had some family affairs to take care of, Cinder supplied without falter. Seeing as how no one was going to further question her, the slender beauty turned her gaze to the blonde former shinobi. If you don't mind, I have something I want to talk to you about alone. Hearing the emphasis she had put on the word, alone, Blake and Pyrrha felt themselves grow ill at ease. However, they weren't the only ones. There's something off about her. I don't know what it is, but this girl just gives me all the wrong vibes, a contemplative young thought. While outwardly not showing any signs of his suspicious, Naruto shrugged. Sure, I have a free period today after lunch anyways. When the two left, a very awkward silence settled over the remaining members of teams NNPR, CMNE, and the whole of Team RWBY. Pyrrha, Nora, and Ren all got along just fine with the all-girl team and would even go as far as to say they were friends. However, none of them were all that comfortable with the members of Team CMNE. Mercury just came off as A in Yang's words. Compete tool. While Emerald simply rubbed everyone the wrong way. Neo was possibly the only exception, but seeing as how she never talked, it only made sense. Well, at least that was how mostly everyone felt towards the diminutive girl. Ruby, however, did not at all care for heterochromic-eyed girl for reasons all her own. Reason enough for her to glare daggers at the ice cream-themed girl, who was simply returning the glare with a taunting smirk. Emerald was the one to break the silence when she huffed. Screw this, I'm gonna go do something actually worth my time. Without another word, the mint-haired teen was gone. Mercury simply gave what he thought to be a charming smile and tried to sit next Pyrrha. Sorry about her attitude. Unknown to him, a small runic circle blinked into existence right underneath where his butt would touch the seat. Right as his cheeks touched the array, the silver-haired teen was sent rolling back through the doors of the cafeteria. Pyrrha turned and gave a thankful smile towards Weiss, having seen the array of glyphs. Thanks, Weiss, I owe you. The Schneeris waved off the thanks. No need to thank me, that guy's just a slime ball and I wouldn't want him sitting next to any of us. Their attention was drawn to the last remaining member of Cinder's team. Seeing both her and RWBY's team captain locked in a heated stare down, they couldn't help but sigh. Both were trying their best to look intimidating, which was normally not that hard. Ruby used a massive scythe that was also a high-caliber sniper rifle and Neo could unnerve most with a smile dash. But right now they looked far more adorable than they did scary. Before the feared Mo Wars had a second crusade, Neo blew Ruby a raspberry and walked off with a spring in her step. Seeing her nemesis walk off, Ruby pouted. I don't like her. The rest of the group could only laugh or sigh. So what exactly did you need to talk to me alone about? Naruto asked, following only slightly behind Cinder, letting the woman lead the way. Without missing a beat, the amber-eyed woman replied. I like the headband. Pick it up on your trip to your home village? A grin broke out across Naruto's whiskered cheeks as he casually folded his arms behind his head. Uzushio isn't my home village, and by the way, my godfather and mentor was my home spy master and ran a network that stretched even into enemy territory. Gonna have to do a little better than some misdirection if you wanna fool me. Really? Thanks for letting me know all that. Naruto had to resist the very strong urge to smack himself. He had just given up 2 pieces of information without her even having to ask. While Jiraiya really had been possibly the best spy master in the history of the shinobi era, having spies in every shinobi village major and minor, Naruto had never really gotten the time to learn the tools of that specific trade and had only picked up the bare minimum. He could almost feel the victorious smirk currently stretched across Cinder's face, making him feel all the more foolish. What I wanted to talk to you about more was, have you made up your mind regarding my question all those weeks ago? Cinder finally revealed. Naruto couldn't help the grimace that flashed across his face. He really hadn't put much thought into if he would help Cinder or not. To be fair though, he had been rather preoccupied with other things to really spare the time to do so. Taking a hand through his hair, he expressed as much to the woman. Arriving at a secluded balcony, Cinder seemed completely unfazed. I see. And what if I continue to go through with my plans? Naruto frowned in thought. Why? Why do you feel like this is the only way to achieve your goal? You know very well why. You've seen it, and as you continue to do missions for those fools on the council, you will see more. You can't deny that I'm right, Naruto. You're right, I can't deny it. I've seen it my whole life. Hell, I was a victim of it. I lost friends and family, because I was too stubborn to do what had to be done, so I can't say my way is any better than yours. But that doesn't make it right either. Think about it, is your goal really worth alienating those around you, shutting yourself away from the world? If you do achieve your goal, what then? Turning away from the blonde, the raven-haired beauty looked out at the emerald forest that stretched out behind Beacon. As much as I would like to have you on my side, I won't put a stop to my plans just for you. I will continue with them, and I will achieve my goal, with or without you. The muscles in Naruto's jaw clenched. I don't care about you stealing stuff, but as soon as you start aiming for innocence, or try and harm any of those close to me, I will stop you. To emphasize his point, Naruto began to pull on his partner's chakra, the miasmic qualities of the energy coming to life in a blazing cloak of a transparent orange flames. However, unlike the response that he expected, her gasping for air or becoming at least a little scared, Cinder instead smirked. Raising up her hand that had previously been folded underneath her bust, Naruto's eyes widened upon seeing a familiar-looking silver ring wrapped around her right ring finger. To his further shock, he began to feel the ring draw his chakra away from him, as if to begin the process of taking Kurama. Said Biju's voice echoed through his mind, "What the hell is going on over there? Why can I feel something trying to drain my chakra?" Snarling in anger, Naruto barked out. "Where did you get that from? This old thing? Happened to find it in a museum, just sitting there. The color matches my dress, so I took it," Cinder replied, feigning interest in the piece of jewelry. Before Naruto could properly begin to form an attack and forcibly take the ring, Cinder casually slipped it off and carelessly tossed the artifact to him, throwing him off guard. Blinking owlishly at the ring that now sat in his palm, the blonde could form no words, far too shocked by the odd turn of events. Sauntering past him, Cinder raked a well-manicured nail across his whiskered cheek, sending a shiver of pleasure down his spine, and further shocking him. The raven-haired beauty's smoky voice whispering into his ears sent another shock of pleasure through his teenage body. Think of it as a show of good faith. Without a word more, Cinder was gone, leaving a heavily blushing and near comatose Naruto to stare blankly ahead. Unbeknownst to the former shinobi, Cinder was lost in a myriad of her own thoughts. While she hadn't shown it before, she had been a little caught off guard to hear the conviction that Naruto spoke with. She wasn't sure how, but somehow she felt as if Naruto could empathize with her situation, with her as a person. For so many years now, she had shut herself off from the world, feeling like she didn't need friends, only associates to help her achieve her goal. Naruto's questions had struck her. What would she do once she got what she wanted? She had done such a good job of keeping everyone around her at arm's length, and now that she was actually thinking about it, maybe she had done too good of a job. When she had first begun this journey, she knew it would be a thankless one, that she would be painted as a criminal in the eyes of most, and she had long since come to accept that. The opinions of others mattered little to her. But now, as she looked at where she currently was, no friends or family to speak of, an almost imperceptible pang tugged at her heart. She was alone, with no one to really rely on, to possibly even help her. Was the end goal worth this price? Could she well and truly continue marching forward? Questions she had never asked before were coming to the surface, and a blue-eyed whiskered teen was at fault for them all. "Blondie! Been a while since we've seen you come in." A grinning Jeff greeted Naruto. Seeing as how he and his team had expended a lot of supplies during their mission to Yuzu, the blonde teen had decided to take a trip to the Achievement Hunter's shop to restock. Of course, he also had some other things on mind. "Hey, Jeff! Yeah, me and my team had a mission that had us gone for a week, but we're back and need to restock on all the essentials. That, and I have that new batch of sealing scrolls ready for you guys." The tattooed store owner nodded and reached down underneath the counter, pulling out 4 separate sealing scrolls, each adorned with the unique symbol that each of his teammates wore: Ren with his flower, Nora with her hammer, Pira's spear and shield, and his own Uzumaki spiral. "Well, here's the usual. Gavin and Ray also threw in some crap they wanted you to test. Don't ask what it is, 'cause I don't know or care. Already used to Jeff's brusque manner of speaking, Naruto only chuckled. Yeah, alright you old man, probably just forgot what it was, huh? Hey! I am not that old! Shut the fuck up, Jeff, you know you are! Came the snarky reply from the curly-haired Michael. Walking out from the back room, the foul-mouthed member of the AH crew threw a head nod at Naruto. Sup, Blondie, said Blonde Teen returned the gesture. Reaching into his jacket, Naruto pulled out his own sealing scroll and tossed it to the mustache store owner who caught it without blinking. Didn't have as much time to work with my mission and also I was only able to make 100 this time. Better get your ass in gear then, Rito, we've been selling them quick like. Doesn't help that Gavin's been using M for stupid shit either. Michael commented. Jeff chose to interject. What the hell has he been using them for? I told him not to take any from the shop, damn it. The shorter member of AH shrugged. Fuck if I know. I've just seen him leaving with a few in hand. Already cursing up a storm, Jeff marched into the back room. God damn it, Gavin. I told you to stop taking shit from the store. Naruto could only look at Michael, who wore a grin on his face as they heard the accented reply. What? I haven't been taking anything. Bullshit. Both Naruto and Michael began to chuckle as they heard Gavin's high-pitched girly screams of pain. Shaking his head, the whiskered teen asked. He didn't take any, did he? Michael in turn shrugged. I don't know, but it's Gavin, so he's probably done something dumb enough to deserve it anyways. Throwing his hands behind his head, Naruto decided to do some digging while he was at the store. So you guys know Cinder pretty well? Raising a brow at the odd question, Michael leaned on the counter and get comfortable. Kind of. Both of us went to the same academy, but she was in the class 2 years below mine. I graduated with my team and that was the last I saw of her. At least until I started working for Jeff. She just popped in one day and recognized me. She seemed different? Naruto asked, now highly invested. This was the most he had learned about the mysterious woman who was so bent on recruiting him, and he wasn't going to miss the opportunity to learn more. Michael seemed to think about the question before shrugging. Well, I never really knew her in the first place, so I'm probably not the best person to judge, but I guess so, yeah. Seemed a little more serious and refined, I guess? Getting up, the shorter male gave a friendly punch to Naruto's shoulder. Why? Want to know if she's got a boyfriend? You dog, you! Naruto's eyes grew comically large as he started to blush. What? No! Shut up! Michael only laughed harder and shouted. Hey guys! Ruto's got a crush on Cinder! Naruto began to bash his head on the countertop, Ray poking his head through the doorway only to comment. Bow chicka wow wow! The signature cackle from Jeff only made the situation worse, as the rest of the crew could be heard making comments. The other customers in the store could only stare in wonder as a blonde teen looked to be trying to split the countertop with his head as the employees all laughed derisively. So how long have you and Nora been friends? Naruto questioned calmly. Not even opening an eye to stare at his captain who was casually seated on the ceiling, Rin kept his composure and smoothly replied. Since we were toddlers. Stretching and assuming the proper position, the blonde teen began to slowly and easily perform push-ups, his muscles rippling as he simultaneously worked out his muscles and chakra control. Really? Wow, no wonder everyone thinks you're a couple. If Rin was caught off guard by the odd remark, he didn't show it, eyes still closed and breathing evenly paced as he continued to meditate. It's a common misconception, yes. Letting go of the chakra that held his hands to the ceiling, leaving the balls of his feet and toes as the only thing anchoring him to the surface, the whiskered teen began to incorporate crunches into his little workout. Have you ever thought about it? Are you trying to play matchmaker for me and Nora? Chuckling at being caught, Naruto continued his workout on the ceiling. Hee maybe. Taking a deep breath in, Ren slowly released it before answering. While I appreciate the gesture, you should probably think about your own love life before attempting to help in others. Having switched to doing squats, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki blushed. I don't know what you mean. It's no use, Naruto. Everyone can see how attached to you Pira has become. Not only that, but Blake from our friends in Team RWBY has also seemed to take a liking to you as well. Sighing, Naruto continued to go through toe touches, unimpeded. I know. It's just, I never had to deal with all this. It was so much easier when all I had to worry about was some group of crazy powerful terrorists coming to get me. Deciding to disregard the complete oddity of his captain's previous statement, Ren continued. Yes, well, it's something that you will eventually have to figure out, lest you alienate the both of them. Now back to doing push-ups, Naruto replied. You know, you remind me of this guy I was friends with. Was the laziest bum I ever knew. He'd spend hours just looking up at the clouds or playing this game called shogi. But he was the smartest guy I've ever met. Give him a few seconds and he'd have like 100 different plans to take someone down. Sounds like someone I could get along with. Ren remarked. Yup. A comfortable silence overtook the two males, Naruto continuing with his workout while Ren continued to meditate, taking advantage of both Pira and Nora being otherwise occupied. The two females of Team NNPR were actually in the library taking care of a project they had all been assigned for Professor Oblek's class. Pira had been paired with Nora while he and Ren were lumped together. Of course, seeing as how Naruto could clone himself and Ren was quite intelligent, the two had finished their own project in one sitting. Whatever peace the two had was quickly interrupted when they heard the sound of someone gently knocking on their door. Seeing as how Naruto was still currently stuck to their ceiling, Ren was the one to answer the door. Hey Blake! Naruto happily greeted upon seeing the familiar face of Team RWBY's Faunus. Said Cat Faunus' cheeks heated up upon seeing a very shirtless Naruto hanging upside down. Her reaction wasn't due to any sort of innocence, having read various, heavy romance novels, but more due to how attractive the sight was. It wasn't that Naruto was overly buff or anything, no, his muscles were tight and corded, showing his inclination towards speed and maneuverability over power. The various scars that dotted his chest and abdomen only served to enhance his hotness, though she was slightly distracted upon noticing a particularly vicious-looking scar that took up the area over his heart. Before she could let her eyes further wander the view, the clinking of porcelain on porcelain broke her out of her hormone-driven thoughts. Out of the corner of her eye, she registered Ren taking a sip of tea. Turning back, the blush returned full force when all she saw was wall of flesh that was Naruto's abdomen. So why'd you come over? Trying her damnedest to not make a fool of herself, Blake looked up into warm blue eyes of someone she was happy to consider one of, if not, her closest friends. I need your help. Naruto could see the worry as much as he could feel it emanating from the amber-eyed teen. With what? I'm going to tell them, Blake replied uneasily. Instead of sharing in her nervousness, Naruto grinned and wrapped Blake up in a hug. That's great, Nico-chan. Of course I'll help. Could you put on a shirt first? Placing a heavily blushing teen back on her feet, Naruto scratched his cheek and chuckled. Yeah, should probably get changed. I'll be back. Left alone, Blake began to fidget, having never really said much of anything to the other male member of Team NNPR. Of course, she was probably the only one feeling the slightest bit awkward, Ren calmly sipping his tea, wholly unperturbed by the recent happenings. So, do you know? Blake asked, feeling the need to finally break the awkward silence. About you being a Faunus? Yes. Caught off guard by the blunt response, Blake could only ask. How? I had my suspicions, but your reaction when we found out Naruto had been lying to us about being a Faunus himself was a dead giveaway, Ren stated matter-of-factly. Before the conversation could go any further, Naruto walked out of the restroom dressed in the school uniform, without the blazer or tie. You ready to do this? Biting her lip, Blake nonetheless nodded. Yeah, better to get it over with now, right? As the door closed, leaving Ren by himself, the long-haired teen released a sigh. Taking a sip from his tea, a content smile stretched across his face. Ah. Finally, some peace and quiet. Run! We're back! Omake number 3, class time with Neo. And so, due to my extensive knowledge on the ferocious beasts, I was able to easily vanquish them and save the small village, Professor Port boasted. Of course, seeing as it was already halfway through his class, the students unfortunate enough to have to suffer through the portly man's peacocking had already fallen back on their usual habits. Naruto was sound asleep, Blake was reading a book she had hidden behind her textbook, Nora was doodling away, Weiss was taking notes. Really, she was working on a project that had been assigned by an earlier class. Pira had decided to use the time to work on her semblance. RWBY had her notebook up to cover up the fact she was sleeping. Ren was either meditating or sleeping. And Yan was flipping through a magazine she had brought with her. Neo, who was the only member of Team CMNE who had gotten Port's class alongside RWBY and NNPR, seemed to be actually paying attention. Seeing this, Professor Port pointed at the diminutive girl and called out in a voice loud enough to gather everyone's attention. Ms. Neopolitan! Why was my use of fire instrumental in my victory over the Grimm? The whole class quietly looked on as Neo made no move to answer, simply maintaining her current look. After a few minutes of pure silence, the other students expected Port to reprimand the girl. However, turning back to look at said professor, everyone was surprised to see the man nodding his head with a hand under his chin. Yes, correct. And extra points for the hypothetical solution of using the village's glass and coal to better help. Well done, Ms. Neopolitan. If only there were more students as astute as you. Jaws hit the floor following that. Not a word had left the teen's lips. Hell, her lips didn't even move in the first place. What was going on? Omake number 4, Fear Incarnate? Both teams RWBY and NNPR had decided that since Naruto's hand had finally healed that they would do a little joint training. Nothing too serious, seeing as it was mostly an excuse for the two teams to merely hang out in the Emerald Forest. The few Grimm that called the forest home would pose no threat, seeing as how the 8 of them were more than capable of holding their own. As a unit? Yeah, no Beowulf or Ursa stood a chance. Unknown to the two teams, an evil far greater than any Grimm or Biju called the forest home, and it had its beady eyes set on them. So you're telling us that you were able to graffiti pretty much an entire mountain in broad daylight, wearing a bright orange jumpsuit, in a village full of highly trained assassins and warriors? Yang questioned. A grinning Naruto nodded his head. Managed to evade some Jounin and Chunin after that too. The others burst into laughter, wondering how in the world a prepubescent boy had managed to outsmart, outrun, and outstealth a village full of supposed professionals. How in the world did you not end up in prison? Weiss asked. Although she was trying to hide the fact that even she found the prank funny, everyone could see the small smirk on her lips. With his arms still crossed behind his head, Naruto shrugged. Our Hokage was like family to me. After he found it out, he just laughed and shook his head at me and asked why I did it. Reminds you of the dumb stuff we used to do, huh, Yang? RWBY asked, still chuckling slightly. Grinning, Yang declared. Yup. Remember when we convinced Uncle Crow that Zwei was the one who was eating all of the strawberries? The rest of the teens rose a brow and waited for either of the sisters to finish telling their story, wondering how they had managed to convince someone that a dog was responsible for eating strawberries, especially considering the man was related to RWBY. Yeah. Uncle Crow stopped letting Zwei in the house and was going crazy trying to figure out how Zwei was finding them even after he hid them. RWBY continued. With a grin already on his face, Naruto spoke up. Okay, this one I gotta hear. Why and how in the world did you two pull that off? While the group of teens conversed, Kurama was listening to the baser instincts that came with taking on the form of a fox kit and was terrorizing the local bird and rabbit population. Seeing a black tail poking out of a nearby bush, the Biju grinned maliciously and prepared to pounce. Said grin fell off his furry muzzle when the owner of the tail emerged from the brush. The glowing crimson eyes, white bone-like mask, and black fur made it obvious that the creature was a Grimm despite its small size. Of course, the fact it was clearly feline did nothing to make it any more intimidating despite its Grimm status. However, the ribbon tied to the cat-like Grimm's ear, though unusual, was something Kurama would never forget seeing. It had once been the calling card of a certain cat that had terrorized Konoha's genin for years. In fact, both Naruto and his mother had grown a hatred for the feline. How it had lived for so long was a mystery that had puzzled even Konoha's greatest minds. The fact that it was able to evade not only genin, but seasoned jounin for hours at a time whilst leading its pursuers on wild hunts that left them wounded and mentally unhinged was another mystery that had surrounded Tora the Konoha no Bakeniko, Tora the change/demon cat of Konoha. Of course, that had been back during the era of shinobi, an age now long gone by, so there was no way that the feline Grimm starring Kurama down was in any way related to Tora. Right? Either way, without waiting a second more, Kurama turned tail and began booking it back towards his container and the others. When a terrified Biju rammed its way into Naruto, knocking the blonde teen to the floor, everyone paused and stared in curiosity. It's here! Run! Run! Curiously, Naruto looked to where Kurama was pointing. For a second he saw only the glowing red eyes of a Grimm. Wondering why his partner was so afraid of some lowly Grimm, the former shinobi stared for a second longer. Upon spotting a familiar red ribbon, his eyes widened comically. Without pausing, Naruto wrapped Kurama around his neck, summoned several clones, each grabbing one of the other teens, and sped off in the opposite direction. Yang, riding on the back of a Naruto clone, shouted over the roar of the winds. "What are we running from?" RWBY, piggybacking another clone, turned to look behind her. Upon seeing the small shadowy form trailing them adorned with a red ribbon, she began to panic. "Ah! Naruto, IT found us!" Weiss, fed up with all the mystery and irritated with being forcibly carried, shouted. "What? What are we running from? What are you two talking about? Remember, you guys were asking about what we were running from back on the first day. Well, that's what we're talking about, and that's what's chasing us," Naruto explained. Everyone turned to look behind them, and were none too thrilled to see it was a feline Grim chasing them. "Aw, it's actually kind of cute. Can we keep it?" Nora cried. "Really? A cat Grim? That's what we're running from," Blake deadpanned. Rolling her eyes, Weiss grabbed Murdernaster and waved it, encircling the small Grim in a light blue glyph. The feline stared in wonder as it was encased in a tomb of frigid ice. "Oh wow, truly that Grim was dash." Weiss' sarcastic speech was cut short when the sound of ice shattering echoed throughout the forest. Everyone stared in shock, RWBY, Naruto, and Kurama more so in terror as the cat began to use its wicked claws to free itself from its icy prison. Hissing, in a blur of speed the cat disappeared. Following that, the clone that was carrying Weiss was violently murdered via a bite to jugular, leaving the Schnee heiress to fall on her rump. Refusing to be outdone by what appeared to a simple cat Grim, Weiss summoned up a multitude of glyphs. To her further shock, the feline merely clawed through the runic circles as if they were corporeal things. When Yang and even Blake got involved, they were just as surprised when the Grim was able to easily evade any and all of their swings or attacks. In return, they received various angry scratches on their forearms, Yang's Ember Celica suffering its fair share of them. "Okay, this is just ridiculous," Yang cried. She was forced onto her bum when a clone Naruto dove in front of her, taking the deadly claw strikes meant for her. Another clone picked her up, two others grabbing Blake and Weiss, and once again teams RWBY and NPR were running. "Now you know why me and RWBY are so terrified of that thing. I tried almost my entire jutsu arsenal and nothing could kill it," Naruto called out. "That thing almost cut Crescent Rose in half," RWBY added, tears streaming down her face. "So what do we do?" Pira asked. Naruto's bangs shadowed his eyes as he whispered out, somehow managing to be heard over the rush of wind. "I'll have to use the jutsu Erosenin taught me. It was the only way I was able to get away last time." Coming to a stop, everyone watched with bated breath as Naruto and his clones stared down the feline Grim that had managed to catch up. Neither side made a move, waiting for the other to show a sign of weakness. Opening his mouth wide, confidence blazing in his cerulean orbs, Naruto cried out, "Run like a bitch, no jutsu!" Chapter 19. "You know we don't have to do this right now, right?" A concerned Naruto stated as he gazed at the raven-haired fauness of Team RWBY. Blake shook herself from her small reverie. "No. If I don't do this now, then something will make me, and I'd rather do this on my own terms." With a resolute nod, the young teen opened the door to the room she shared with her teammates, her friends Naruto following behind her. The pair was greeted by the curious, yet equally happy, faces of the rest of Team RWBY. "Hey Foxy! Here for that match finally?" Yang asked with a cocky grin. Already seeing Naruto ready to reply with his own smart-ass response, Blake was quick to cut in. "No. He's here, because I asked him to be for this." Seeing the serious look etched into their teammate's face, the others dropped what they were doing and turned all eyes onto her. RWBY was the one to ask the inevitable. "What do you mean, Blake? Here for what?" Taking a deep breath, the teen fauness replied, "I haven't been completely honest with you guys." Yan, not being able to help herself, sassed, "Oh come on, not another big secret. I thought we were done after Foxy's." Shooting her partner a withering glare, Blake continued, "Ever since I got admitted to Beacon, I've been trying my hardest to distance myself and hide this secret. But I wouldn't be treating you guys like real friends, like people I trust, if I didn't tell you at least." Taking a deep breath, the raven-haired teen reached up to the bow that sat atop her wavy locks and pulled, revealing a pair of cat ears with fur a shade of deep violet that matched her stockings. "I'm a faunus." In response, Weiss scoffed. "That's your big secret? If we didn't care when the dunce over there said he was one, Why do you think we'd care if you're one? Rolling her eyes, Ruby interjected. What Weiss meant to say was that you're our teammate and friend Blake, and no matter what you always will be. Yeah, come on Blake, have a little more faith in us. Yang added. While she was happy to hear the reassurance actually come from her team's mouths, the raven-haired teen knew there was still one last hurdle to get over, and this one would be slightly more difficult. Well, there's a little more to it. What do you guys know about the White Fang? Without a thought, Weiss was the first to respond. You mean that gang of no-life terrorists? While she was less than happy with what her former group had become, Blake still very much so sympathized with their reasons for doing such, and what they originally stood for, and so her reply was not so surprising. Terrorists? The only reason they had to resort to terrorist tactics was because of people like you. Like me. What have I done? Weiss shouted back. You have to ask, Ms. I'm the heiress to the Schnee dynasty? Your family is responsible for some of the most horrendous treatment of people like me. Your father is responsible for shooting down almost every attempt to get equal rights for the Faunus. And for good reason. The White Fang and their ilk shouldn't be getting equal rights. They should be locked up for their crimes. What crimes? Wanting to be treated just like everybody else. Wanting to walk down the street without being glared or cussed at. Murder. Theft. Vandalism. The list goes on. In the past decade alone, the White Fang is responsible for killing almost a dozen of my relatives and stealing millions of dollars in dust and other materials from the Schnee family. Before the argument could go any further or descend into something else entirely, Naruto unleashed a wave of his chakra and shouted. Enough. With both teens effectively cowed, though still heatedly glaring at the other, the Jinchuriki continued in a firm voice. You both are teammates, friends. There is no reason for either of you two to be fighting like this. Blake, still feeling offended and angered by Weiss' words, replied. She's acting like a spoiled brat. Weiss scoffed. Me? You're acting like the White Fang is right and should be given medals. Yang, having heard enough and seeing the almost scared look in her little sister's eyes, stepped up and attempted to quell her teammate's anger. Hey! Come on, guys! We're all friends here, right? Let's take a deep breath and dash. Completely ignoring her partner, Blake glared into the pale blue eyes of her teammate and shouted. People like you are the reason I joined them in the first place. Following that, there were no words said, only silence as Blake's words finally sunk in. Ruby, having sat on the sidelines and watched almost tearfully as two of her friends screamed and hollered, quietly asked. Blake? You were a part of the White Fang? Having realized what she had said and seeing what her and Weiss' argument had done to the people around them, Blake sighed and lowered her head. Yes, Ruby, I used to be a member of the White Fang. Seeing Weiss opening her mouth, Naruto interjected. Tell them why you left. Still not able to look her teammates in the eye, Blake admitted. I left because I couldn't justify what we were doing as right anymore. We used to stand for equality, for peace. When my partner was ready to sacrifice countless innocent people, all for petty revenge, I knew I couldn't keep working for them. Again, silence descended on the group of teens. This time, however, it was Weiss who broke the silence, speaking in a surprisingly subdued voice. I'm sorry, Blake. I had no idea. It's just, the White Fang has caused me and my family a lot of trouble. Blake was quick to interject, shaking her head. No, I'm sorry, Weiss. It was wrong of me to act like you were the one responsible for all of this. Scooping her whole team into a group hug, Yang shouted. Oh. Look at you two. Acting like actual friends. I guess you could say, the cat's out of the bag. Eh? A resounding slapping sound echoed in the room as the rest of Team RWBY put palm to face at the terrible pun. Standing off to the side, Naruto smiled as he saw the four young women deepen their already strong bond. Quietly leaving the room, not wanting to intrude on what he felt was a more personal moment, the blonde felt a tug on his heart as he remembered the last time Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, and him had looked that happy, a time before Orochimaru had forcibly split them apart, worming his way into Sasuke's mind. Back when he had chased after Sakura, proclaiming his supposed love for her. Back when everything had been simple. When he didn't have to worry about his friends dying, because they were close to him. Back when all he was worried about was becoming Hokage and earning the respect and acknowledgement of his village. Opening the door to his own room, Naruto was greeted by the smiling face of Pira. Mere seconds later, the ever-bubbly face of Nora popped into his field of view, the orange-haired teen holding up a bottle of what he could only guess was nail polish. "Captain Whiskers! We're doing makeovers! It's your turn!" Eyeing the small glass bottle full of whatever it was that nail polish actually was, Naruto shook his head. I'm good, Nora, thanks though." Come on. Ren was a good sport and let me do his nails." Nora pouted. Turning, Naruto couldn't help but to burst into laughter as he stared at a defeated-looking Ren with cherry-red nails. Still laughing, Naruto shook his head again. "No, really I'm good, Nora." Grinning deviously, the hammer wielder reached out a hand for her blonde captain's cheeks. "Don't make me use your whiskers!" Wide-eyed and fearful, Naruto slowly began backing up. "Now, Nora, let's not do anything too rash here." Turning to Pira, the former shinobi called out. "Pira-chan! I could use some help about now." Giggling, the redhead instead held up her hand to show that Nora had even gotten to her nails now a simple white. "In this case, it may be best to just give in, Naruto." Stubborn as any Uzumaki, Naruto refused to give in to the wiles of his eccentric teammate, and frantically began to look for an out. Seeing only one option available to him, the blonde took it. Using chakra, Naruto stuck himself to the ceiling. Pouting, Nora began jumping on her bed in an attempt to reach her stubborn captain, intent on painting his nails just as she had done for the rest of Team NNPR. As he watched Ren try and convince Nora to give up, Pira laughing off to the side, Naruto came to a realization. He had no reason to be envious of the bond the members of Team RWBY shared when he and his own team shared a bond just as strong. They knew about his past, the important bits they knew about what he was, and they didn't care. Team NNPR was no Team 7, and that was just fine by him. "Could someone please explain to me how I got dragged into this?" Naruto asked as he walked alongside his teammates and Team RWBY. "Seeing as how the Vital Festival is coming up soon and students from the other kingdoms will be arriving sometime today, I figured that as heiress to the Shinii name and being a student of the prestigious Beacon Academy, it is my duty to welcome them to the great kingdom of Vale," Weiss announced with a flourish. Hands folded behind his head, Naruto squinted at the rapier wielder. "No, I get that you want to scope out the competition, but how did me and my team get dragged into coming with you?" Huffing, Weiss crossed her arms. "That is so not why we're here." Deciding to ignore the incredulous looks sent her way, the young teen continued. "As for why you're here, ask Blake." Sighing, the teen Faunus explained. "Since you guys were gone for a week on your mission, we figured it'd be a good way to spend time to catch up. Yeah, and maybe even make a visit to that awesome weapons store," RWBY added. Naruto stared at the excited team captain before speaking. "You just want to ask them what they did to my staff, don't you?" Twiddling her fingers, the younger teen mumbled out. "Maybe. What's this weapons store that everyone's been going on about?" "RWBY couldn't stop talking about them after you took her there," Yang asked. Her younger sister had literally spent near an hour that night going on and on about how amazing of a store it was and how she would now exclusively shop there. Oh, it's the store that Naruto owns," Nora interjected. Before questions could be raised, Ren added. "Partially. He worked out a deal with the other owners. There's one guy with a really big beard and glasses Jack. And this kind of scary guy who sounds almost exactly like him Ryan. And this guy with a funny mustache and a lot of cool tattoos Jeff. Plus this kind of short guy who likes to cuss a lot Michael. Oh. And then there's this guy with a funny accent and his brown friend, and they do this weird thing and yell out X-Ray and Vav a lot. Ray and Gavin." Those who had never been to the store being Blake, Yang, and Weiss stared incredulously at the others. "You sure it was a store and not a circus?" Blake asked bluntly. Having seen firsthand the madness that was the Achievement Hunters, Naruto shrugged. Little of both. Before anyone else could say anything, the group's attention was drawn elsewhere by the loud shouts of some of the shipyard workers. "Stowaway! Get back here, you little thief!" The two teams watched as several of the workers chased after a blonde teen who looked to be around their age. What caught the eye though was the fact that he was swinging off of the poles that dotted the harbor like a professional acrobat. Naruto raised a brow upon seeing what appeared to be a yellow monkey tail extending from the other blonde's backside, the extra appendage appearing to aid the teen. Blake raised her brow as she noticed the male Faunus looking pointedly at her for some reason. Thanks to her own heightened eyesight courtesy of being a cat Faunus, she too was able to see the monkey tail that marked the male as a Faunus. Having run out of poles to use to propel him, the unnamed Faunus fell to the ground and began sprinting towards them. As he passed by, Blake was completely caught off guard when the running blonde passed her and attempted a flirtatious wink. Everyone then turned their resident cat girl when they heard and saw her shiver. "Something wrong, Blake?" Ruby asked innocently. "That Faunus winked at me," the raven-haired teen admitted in a voice of equal parts creeped out and disgusted. Jan was quick to take advantage of the moment. "Looks like someone's got an admirer." Blake stared at her teammate in disgust. "You, no thanks." Having already figured her partner would say that, Jan grabbed both Blake and Naruto in either of her arms. "Oh, that's right. I forgot you're more of a fox lover, huh?" Alabaster cheeks bloomed a cherry red as Blake hastily replied. "Jan! Shut up!" Grinning, the busted teen cheekily responded. "I didn't hear you disagreeing." Before the two partners could descend into any bickering, a shout from behind them grabbed their attention. "Friend Ruby!" Having heard the voice come from directly behind her, the youngest of the group jumped in surprise. Penny! What are you doing here?" As the group looked on between the somewhat awkward exchange of words, Naruto was busy having his own internal conversation with his tenant. "Kurama? Is it just me or is this girl giving off some really weird vibes?" The Biju narrowed its ruby red eyes. "No. In fact, I don't sense anything from her." "What? But how is that possible?" "I can sense something from her, but whatever it isn't natural," Naruto pondered. "I can feel that too, but she doesn't register on my negative emotion sensing. It's like she doesn't even exist." "That can't be, right? Even someone like Ruby or Pera pop up on your radar, right?" Huffing in annoyance, Kurama nodded, "And that's because they're human and like any sentient being, have a sense of right and wrong, a sense of morality, and the ability to do good or bad. As innocent as she may seem, even Ruby has her moments of anger, of jealousy. Pera, as golden-hearted as she may seem, is the same and has her moments of hatred and disgust. This girl has either. But even animals and Grimm appear to you. Why doesn't she?" the blonde shinobi asked, completely dumbfounded. Sure, he wasn't the sharpest kunai in the pouch, but even he understood the fact that humans were in no way perfect. Every person, no matter how pure of heart they may seem, carried a darkness with them. It was simply the human condition. It was a fact of nature. Light could not exist without darkness and vice versa. Balance. Balance of good and evil. Balance of right and wrong. Even animals followed this law. Like I said, it's because they have sentience. They have the capacity to feel, to reason. The ability to feel pain. This thing lacks that, the Biju explained, sounding as if he was horrified that such a thing could even be made. Considering that he was a portion of a being that amounted to being a primordial god, a giver and taker of life, a thing of nature and life, it made sense. To a being like him, the creation of something that could move and talk and was self-aware yet lacked a capacity to have emotions, to have a moral code, was a travesty. "You are odd," came the flat-toned voice that broke Naruto from his musings. Having been caught up in his own little world, he failed to notice the odd girl invading his personal space. Scratching his cheek, Naruto replied, "How so? You have whiskers like a cat." The blonde Jinchuriki couldn't help but sweat drop at the blunt reply. Yeah? Had M since I was born?" Again, the rest of the group resumed their little chat, awkwardly caught up by the strangeness that was Penny. But both Naruto and Blake were distracted by the hushed voices of a passing pair of Faunus. Being the only two with enhanced hearing, they were the only ones able to make out what was being said. "Why are we trying the docks again? Last time that blonde dude almost caught us and roasted us." "I know, and that's exactly why we're going back. We weren't able to grab everything we needed, so we're going back to get the rest." Knowing exactly what the two were talking about, Naruto and Blake narrowed their eyes. Turning to the other, they shared a nod. Whatever the white fan needed at the docks, they would be there to find out. Later that night, with the moon hanging high in the blanket of the sky, Naruto and Blake watched from atop a stack of large freighters as white fan members moved crates of what they could only assume to be dust and other valuables onto a large bullhead. Naruto turned to see the defeated look on his friend's face. Frowning, he placed a hand on her shoulder and inquired, "Something wrong?" Sighing, the young Faunus replied, "It's just hard to believe that the group I used to fight for, has fallen so low. I knew the evidence was there, but part of me always hoped it was just slander. Now, Well, here's the proof. Before Naruto could offer any words, a familiar and boisterous voice that made his skin crawl echoed through the shipping yard. Hey! What's the hold up? We're not exactly the most inconspicuous bunch of thieves at the moment. Why don't you animals try and pick up the pace? Both Naruto and Blake watched, shocked, as Roman Torchwick stepped into view in his usual state of dress. What? Torchwick? Something's not right here. There's no way the White Fan would be working with a human, especially not someone like him. Seeing the raven-haired teen rising to her feet and unsheathing her weapon, Naruto stood to his feet and called out "Hi no Ishi." Cracking a cocky grin, the blonde captain spoke up. Well, let's find out why. The two easily jumped off their perch and began sprinting towards the group. Naruto, while capable of stealth, didn't exactly prefer it. With a Rasengan already formed in one hand, the ex-shinobi broke through the ranks of White Fan members and jumped into the air. Torchwick, having spotted the blur of yellow as it jumped into the air, managed to roll out of the way before he could be hit. Both he and the White Fan members watched in slight awe as the small orb of condensed energy tore the ground asunder, sending chunks of concrete everywhere. Seeing the person responsible for the surprise attack step out of the dust cloud that had been kicked up, Torchwick sneered. "Miss me, Torchwick?" Naruto taunted with a cocky grin. "Like a bad infection," the crime boss retorted. Blake joined her friend and looked at the White Fan members that surrounded them. Removing the bow that hid her ears, the young woman questioned her former comrades. "Why are you working with a scumbag like Roman Torchwick?" None of them responded, lowering their weapons and looking away in what could only be shame. Blake watched, saddened as none of her fellow Faunus offered a response, some small part of her hoping there was some valid reason that her brothers in arms had fallen so low. Naruto meanwhile frowned. That frown only deepened as Torchwick spoke up in that same boisterous voice of his. "Haven't you heard? Me and the White Fan have decided to join in a partnership of sorts." Angry and hurt, Blake lashed out verbally. "Shut up. Whatever your little plan is, it ends now." Despite having the business end of the young teen's weapon pointed at him, the flame-haired man continued to grin. "I wouldn't call it a little plan." As if on cue, two massive bullheads roared into view, kicking up winds and illuminating the previously dark wharf. Taking advantage of the two teens being distracted, Torchwick aimed his cane at Blake, and fired, a ball of flames exploding forwards at high speeds. Before the flaming projectile could get anywhere near the raven-haired Faunus, Naruto appeared in a blur of speed and batted the ball away with a swing of Hi no Ishi. Seeing the White Fan members that had previously been inactive taking up arms again, Blake drew her own ebony weapon and readied herself. Meanwhile, the other members of Team RWBY and NNPR plus a tag along in the form of Penny stared in the direction that they had just seen two bullheads fly. "Think that's where Naruto and Blake are?" Yang asked aloud. No one said a word, simply shaking their heads before sprinting off in the direction of the bay. Naruto ducked under the swing of a sword aimed to cut him in half and pulled on the black ribbon tied to his forearm, pulling Blake over him, allowing her to smash her heels into the White Fan member's mask, shattering it, and sending him to the floor in an unconscious heap. Ignoring their downed comrade, two of the Faunus charged at the crouching girl only for her to extend her leg and sweep their legs out from underneath them. Naruto leapt over his friend and plowed his elbow into the stomach of one of the airborne attackers while the other received the pommel of Blake's weapon to his own abdomen. Releasing his hold on the black ribbon that had connected him and his impromptu partner, Naruto turned and drew out the blade of Hi no Ishi, blocking the blade of another White Fan member who had attempted to skewer him. Black cloth wrapped around the man's hands, pulling them down, allowing Naruto to swing the staff portion of his weapon into the white mask of his opponent. Steel clashed against steel as Blake brought up her weapon and stopped a swing meant to cut into her side. Flipping over his friend, Naruto delivered a vicious leg drop onto the unsuspecting man's skull. With her weapon attached to her ribbon, Blake tossed it into the crowd, beaming one directly in the stomach. Pulling on the ribbon, the blade spun back into her hand, allowing her to quickly parry another strike and retaliate with her own. Unsheathing her weapon, revealing there to be a smaller blade within the larger one, Blake again tossed a portion of her weapon into the grouping of White Fan members, the spinning blade slamming into an opponent's mask. With the years of dexterity that came from wielding and mastering her style and weapons, the teen Faunus pulled on the ribbon, the strip of cloth wrapped in such a way that it pulled on the trigger of the gun portion. The laws of motion came into play, the force of the shot propelling the weapon right back at its wielder, only to miss and strike the White Fan member attempting a sneak attack, Blake simultaneously taking out another with a quick swipe from the bladed sheath of her weapon that was now held in a reverse grip. Another shot was fired via ribbon pulling, and then another, turning the weapon into naught but a blur of black with the occasional spark of light from a gunshot. Blake was meanwhile dishing out her fair share of strikes with kicks or swings from the larger blade in her left hand, all the while controlling the path and trajectory of the other piece of her weapon with her right hand. Naruto was anything but idle at this time, dealing out chakra-empowered strikes that left his opponents with cracked or broken bones. Performing a backflip, Naruto dodged a literal bullet, the staff half of High no Ishi coming up and slamming into the underside of a would-be attacker's jaw whilst he was crouched, sending blood and teeth into the air. Using a perfectly timed Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement technique, to dodge yet another bullet, the blonde shinobi turned huntsman used the distraction to answer with a shot from High no Ishi, now in its rifle form. Spinning, Naruto ducked under a swing from what looked to be a club of some sort, extending his leg and swiping the attacker's legs out from underneath them. Still crouched and now facing the opposite direction, Naruto extended his right arm and pulled the trigger, sending a bullet tearing through the air. As the recoil hit, the blonde loosened his grip, allowing the staff/sword/rifle to ricochet backwards. As his previously fired bullet tore the leg muscles of an advancing enemy, High no Ishi plowed into the still airborne club-wielding white-fanned member behind him. Rising to his feet and grabbing his weapon in one fluid motion, Naruto shifted his head to the side, dodging a punch. Turning around, the half-blood Uzumaki viciously slammed his own fist into his attacker's mask, shattering it, and sending the man skidding along the ground. Now standing back to back, Naruto and Blake fearlessly stared down the remaining white fan members that surrounded them, the rest of them laying at their feet, unconscious or in far too much pain to do much more than lay there on the concrete. "You idiots just can't do anything right, can you?" Naruto's eyes flickered to the side, and in an instant, High no Ishi's blade was singing through the air, slicing a blazing fireball in two. Blake rushed the crime boss, weaving around the projectiles aimed at her. When the teen faunus was only a scant few yards away, the effeminate man's aim seemed to improve, one of his shells seemingly about to hit its mark. To Naruto's surprise, Blake pulled off a move that would have made any shinobi proud. An exact clone of the raven-haired teen appeared, taking its creator's place and fading away as the blazing shell impacted with it. Torchwick flicked his cane up in the next instant, batting aside the half of her weapon that Blake had attached to her ribbon. Of course, that was the only split-second distraction she needed as she emerged from the cloud of debris that had been kicked up from her opponent's missed shot, the other larger half of her weapon held in her other hand in a reverse grip. Torchwick moved his head to side, dodging Blake's weapon by the smallest of margins. Her follow-up, firing off a shot to bring the other half of her weapon spinning back to her and attempting a stab with it, was just as easily avoided. However, Blake was not so easily able to dodge the swing from Torchwick's cane, the blow to her abdomen sending her rolling. It was only thanks to years of experience that the flame-haired crime boss was able to narrowly dodge out of the way of a flying kick courtesy of Naruto, lashing out with a shot from his cane in response. Instead of a cry of pain though, the young teen exploded into a cloud of smoke. "Shit! Forgot the brat could make clones!" Torchwick cursed. That was his only moment of rest as he was soon beset by a pair of rushing blondes attempting to pull a pincer maneuver on him. Firing off a shot at one, Torchwick swiftly moved around the punch of the other clone and popped it with a harsh hit to the cranium. Turning around, the crime boss mentally cursed again as he saw 4 more cockily grinding blondes ready to rush him. Really starting to hate this kid. Meanwhile, the real Naruto was helping Blake to her feet. The young teen coughed as she attempted to gather air in her lungs. The hit had been unexpectedly powerful, and there was no doubt that she now had a bruised rib or two. Looking up and seeing their enemy being toyed with by a few dozen or so copies of her blonde friend brought a smirk to her face though. "So you can make clones too?" Grinning, Naruto boasted. "Yeah, but mine can actually deal some damage and move on their own." Seeing Torchwick narrowly dodge a punch that then created a small crater in the pavement, Blake nodded in agreement. While her semblance allowed her to create some very real-looking clones, they were more akin to an afterimage than anything else. They couldn't move of their own accord or really interact with the physical world unless she forcibly pumped them full of her aura or some other form of energy. The pair's little break was interrupted as the nearby bullheads unleashed a hail of bullets, taking out each and every one of Naruto's clones, leaving Torchwick unscathed. "Thank you. Finally decided to do your job." Without any sort of warning, Torchwick fired off a shot in a seemingly random direction. Hearing a cry of pain and a chorus of worried shouts, Naruto and Blake swiveled their eyes to see their teammates and friends surrounding a downed Nora. Naruto's eyes grew wide as the bullheads turned their sights to the group of teens, the barrels on the mounted guns already beginning to spin. No! In a blur of speed, Naruto disappeared, reappearing in front his friends already speeding through a chain of hand seals. Suetun, Sujin Hiki, water release, water formation wall. A massive torrential wave of water seemingly slithered out from the nearby ocean, coalescing and eventually forming into an all-encompassing wall in front of the group, stopping any and all bullets dead in their tracks. The others watched in slight awe as shells floated throughout the wall of water that surrounded them, evidence of its stopping power, and the power their blonde friend was capable of. They were caught off guard when a clone of Naruto suddenly appeared in a swirl of leaves, carrying a slightly disoriented Blake. Blake! Her team cheered, gathering the young faunus in a group hug, sans Weiss. Their little reunion was stopped when they saw Naruto drop his hands, releasing his hold on the jutsu and allowing the water to splash down onto the docks as a harmless wave. However, harmless wasn't the word they'd used to describe their friend. Torchwick! Naruto roared out. Team RWBY was unprepared for the wave of pure malice and hate that washed over them, their breath catching in their throats as fear gripped their hearts. Team NPR, already having experienced this feeling before, was a little more prepared, but were still as vulnerable to the suffocating power their captain was drawing upon, finding it slightly difficult to breathe. However, even they were soon forced to their knees as a burning orange cloak of energy began to form around their blonde friend. The energy, or whatever it was, bubbled like boiling water, frothing and continuously moving. As a feeling of sheer terror consumed them, they watched, wide-eyed, as a single tail began to form, oozing into form, waving to and fro in a mesmerizing dance. Similarly, a long pair of ears began to bubble up and take shape atop the Jinchuriki's head. Naruto's arms were encased in the same hazy shroud of orange, claws taking form. Likewise, his legs were enshrouded by wicked-looking blade-like talons that tore into the concrete with ease. Naruto himself became far more animalistic than was previously thought possible. Long gone were the sapphire blue eyes he was known for, replaced by burning crimson orbs full of hate and loathing. Claws sharp enough to tear through flesh replaced his normally dull fingernails. Fangs poked over his snarling lips. His already wild head of blonde spikes was now a veritable mane, looking shaggier than usual. Now standing on all four limbs, the usually cheery and knucklehead blonde captain of Team NPR was the image of terror, vicious and far more beastly than any Grimm could be capable of. The others watched in horror as Torchwick fired off a series of shots while the bullheads unloaded on their friend, the bullet storm kicking up enough dirt and debris to block their view. Pyrrha had to forcibly be held back by Rin while Yang held her younger sister in a tight embrace, watching and unable to do anything as their friend became the victim of an impromptu firing squad only feet away. As the hail of bullets came to an end, everyone was shocked and beyond relieved when a nightmarish roar echoed throughout the air, the concussive blast of air accompanying it blowing away the cloud of dirt and debris, revealing an unscathed Naruto. All around him lay a countless number of shells, the concrete torn apart, and yet not even a hair was out of place on the Jinchuriki himself. Leaping down from his perch, the Uzumaki Jinchuriki cratered the ground upon impact. Moving a hand forward, all eyes widened as the demonic shroud's matching limb moved and actually extended, reaching one of the bullheads that hovered in the air. As the aircraft began to visibly struggle to escape the corrosive grip of the enraged Jinchuriki, Naruto closed his fist, the shroud copying its creator, razor-sharp claws easily tearing through the thickened armor of the aerial vehicle. The night sky above the wharf was lit by a blinding explosion as fuel met the acidic chakra of a Jinchuriki. While this happened, Torchwick was unloading near everything he had at the enraged teen, and none of it got anywhere close to actually doing any sort of damage, the hazy orange cloak moving to protect its master and neither deflecting or destroying any and all projectiles sent his way, the blonde teen himself not even bothering to look in the direction of the man. "What the hell are you playing with, Cinder?" Torchwick questioned, watching as the enraged teen before him swung his other arm, catching the second bullhead in the grasp of his demonic energy shroud. In a show of preternatural strength, Naruto easily brought the machine down, plowing it into the hard concrete and setting off another explosion that rocked the pier. Seeing his chance, amidst the chaos created by the rampaging teen, Torchwick slipped away unnoticed, knowing he stood no chance against such a monstrosity, not yet at least. Turning to where he had last sensed the man responsible for harming one of his teammates, Naruto growled in frustration upon not finding a trace of the crime boss. Releasing his hold on his Bijuu chakra, his feral features and the demonic shroud began to slowly recede, fading out of existence, leaving behind a disgruntled blue-eyed teen. Just as slippery as that Team Orochimaru, Naruto mentally cursed. Remembering why he had been so enraged, the blonde decided to shove those bot A to the side and rush back to his teammates. As he approached, he was relieved to see Nora getting up, holding her head in pain. "Oi, what hit me?" While her clothes were slightly singed and she looked slightly disoriented, the hammer-wielding teen looked relatively unharmed. Offering a hand to help his teammate up, which she took, Naruto explained, "It was that slime ball Torchwick. But don't worry, next time we'll get him, Tebeo." After having dusted herself off, Nora cheered. "Yay! Can we break his legs?" Laughing at the eccentric girl's exuberance, Naruto nodded. "Yup. And you'll have the honor of doing it yourself. Can I also join in breaking the bad man's legs?" Penny asked with her usual forced cheer, joining the conversation for the first time. Sweat dropping, Naruto thought to himself, it's like Sai all over again, except without the penis jokes. Before anyone could comment on the odd girls, oddness, the sound of someone running towards them caught their attention. Turning, everyone cocked a brow in curiosity as a frazzled-looking blonde dressed in simple white armor that covered him from the neck down, reached their position, panting and seemingly out of breath. After gulping down some air, the shaggy-haired teen wheezed out. "Penny! You can't go running off like that. Captain Ironwood would kill me if he ever found out I lost you." For the first time, Penny smiled in what seemed to be genuine happiness. "Friend John! You found me!" Sweat dropping, the now-named John gave a defeated nod. "Yeah, just had to follow all the explosions." Extending a hand, the ginger-haired teen pointed and flatly stated, "But that wasn't me. It was Ruby's friend, Naruto." Turning to see his fellow blonde wearing an evil grin as he and the battered orange-haired female seemed to be plotting something, John again sweat dropped. "These guys are weird." Chuckling nervously, the blonde teen gave a short bow. "Well, thank you for looking after Penny for me." Being the reason Penny was even able to associate with the rest of the group, Ruby replied with a smile. "No problem. She's always welcome to hang with us." Penny wrapped her arms around the young teen and unknowingly began to crush her in a hug. "Oh, thank you so much, friend Ruby." Struggling to escape the vice-like grip of the ginger's grip, the red-themed huntress to be choked out. "Penny! Too much." Releasing her hold, Penny began to frantically apologize. Knowing that it was only a matter of time before his boss and Penny's technical father sent out a search team for them, John began to tug her arm, pulling her with him, showing a surprising amount of strength. "Thank you again. We have to go now, though." The two teams watched the odd pair leave, some of them scratching their heads in curiosity. Arms folded behind his head and eyes closed, Naruto offhandedly commented. "Well, they were strange." When he didn't hear a response after a few seconds, he opened his eyes to see everyone staring at him incredulously. "What?" Blake was the one to point out the obvious. "You're a warrior from a civilization that died ages ago and have a super powerful mass of energy tied to you. I don't think you should be talking about other people being odd." Scratching the back of his head, the former shinobi chuckled. Guess you're right." Slinging an arm around his shoulders, Yam leaned on her fellow blonde. "That reminds me. Since you're from like thousands of years ago, wouldn't that make you thousands of years old?" Scratching his head in puzzlement, Naruto responded. "I don't think so. I mean, Kurama said it was kind of like being thrown through a wormhole or something." "Why?" "Well, because it'd be pretty weird if you and Blake started dating and you were like older than Remnant." "Yang!" Blake shouted, a rosy tint coloring her cheeks at the implication of her and the Jinchuriki dating. Before Yang could give any sort of cheeky response, Weiss interjected. "Ugh. Can we just go back to Beacon already? We've been out all day." No need to be so cold, Weiss," Yang replied. A chorus of groans was the answer to the Bustateen's pun. "I can't believe you just said that," Blake muttered. "Yeah, even I knew that one was pretty bad," Nora added. Yang pouted. "You guys wouldn't know comedy gold if it hit you in the face." Ignoring Yang's terrible puns, Weiss is right. "We do have class tomorrow," Ren interjected. The others gave a tired nod and began to make their out of the now destroyed wharf, completely ignoring the still burning remains of the two bullheads and the unconscious forms of the white fan members that Blake and Naruto had knocked around. However, the blaring sounds of sirens caused them all to groan aloud. Glaring at Naruto, Weiss spoke up. I blame you. Me. What did I do? The Shin'i heiress simply raised a hand and pointed to the destruction and chaos behind them, not needing words to convey her point. Naruto began to chuckle. Oh yeah? You may have a point there, princess. I guess you could say he outfoxed them. Ugh. Young. Buh. Chapter 20. Pyrrha! Pinball! Back flipping out of the way of a hammer strike courtesy of Nora, Pyrrha slipped off her bronze shield and gave it a great toss. Nora, while not the fastest member of her team, was able to easily avoid the thrown shield. However, said bubbly teen was not as prepared for one of several clones to send Akko spinning back around with a swing from his staff. Collapsing mangled, Nora was able to quickly duck under the deadly shield, escaping it yet again. Seeing the shield making its way around to him, Ren was quick to jump and twirl, spinning parallel to the bronze disc at just the right time. This also served to surprise the Naruto clone he had been dealing with, the doppelganger popping out of existence as Akko tore through it with ease. With a grin, the Kage Bunshin that stood just off to the side was more than eager to fulfill his role and batted back into the ring he and the other clones had formed around Ren and Nora. However, it and its brethren were surprised when Nora decided to join in the game of deadly pinball, using mangled to send Akko tearing through one clone before it rebounded off the wall and continued to cut through the ranks of clones. Those few clones smart enough to dodge the frisbee of doom quickly became victim to the rapid fire of Ren's dual SMGs. The childhood friends were spared no time though, Naruto and Pyrrha emerging from the cloud of smoke that was the product of a dozen or so Kage Bunshin popping. Nora was quick enough to duck under the swing of her captain's Shikujo, squeezing the trigger on Manghoud's handle, plowing the hammer into the Jinchuriki and sending him hurtling into the ceiling with a pink flash. Ren, meanwhile, was nimbly avoiding various thrusts and jabs from Pyrrha. Bringing one of his twin pistols up, the long-haired teen used the bladed portion of the SMG to counter a thrust from Milo, quickly attempting to take advantage of the opening with a palm thrust. Pyrrha was quick to bring up Akko with one hand while the other used Milo to catch Ren unaware and sweep him off his feet. Bringing up her leg, the invincible girl's foot collided with her teammate's abdomen, sending him skipping across the ground. Listening to her instincts, honed from years of actual combat and training, Pyrrha raised her shield above her head just in time to stop Manghald from squishing her into a paste. Using her semblance at just the right moment, she was also able to repel most of the actual force of the hit, sparing herself from having to deal with broken bones as well. Going a step further with her control over polarity, Pyrrha supercharged the area between her shield and Nora's hammer, the quick spike acting with enough force to send the orange-haired teen flying through the air. Landing in a surprised heap alongside her childhood friend, Nora was quick to get back up. "Sting!" Rin called out. Nodding her head, Nora shifted Manghald into its grenade launcher form, firing off a shot aimed directly for Pyrrha. Not knowing what her teammates had planned, Pyrrha decided to take the safer route and dodge out of the way of the shell, Milo shifting into its own firearm form and unleashing a quick succession of shots. Weaving around the incoming bullets, the duo were quickly closing the gap between them and their team's second in command. As Pyrrha readied herself to fight the two, their team captain decided to reappear. Caught off guard by his sudden appearance, Nora caught a palm thrust directly to the abdomen, harshly forcing the air from her lungs. Ren, having a split second more to react, used it to the best of his ability, and dodged out of the way of a swing from No Ishii. He was however wholly unprepared for his captain to slide his grip down to the ring portion of the Shikujo, quickly shift the staff into its own gun form, and squeeze the leather bar, sending a bullet barreling into his upper chest. Firing off another shot just to Ren's side, Naruto struck a recovering Nora with a recoil-empowered hit to her solar plexus, sending her tumbling backwards. Ren, gathering back his wits, went for an aura-powered strike, but was quickly shut down by Pyrrha's timely appearance, Milo in spear form knocking his arm aside while Akko was shoved into his chest, throwing him into a heap next to his partner. "Was wondering where you had gone off to," Pyrrha quipped. Sulking at the friendly jab, Naruto replied, "Hey, you tried taking a hit from Nora. Pretty sure she actually broke something this time." Knowing full well that her friend could, and probably already had, heal from even broken bones in a short time frame, the redhead only chuckled and shook her head. Seeing her formerly down teammates getting back up, she lowered herself and took up a ready stance. Naruto likewise tensed his muscles, casually twirling high no ishi in one hand. Holding himself up on one knee, Rin called out, "Surprise bloom!" Bringing herself to her feet, Nora nodded and brought her hammer up. Naruto and Pira fully expected a frontal assault of some sort, and so were heavily surprised when, in a flash of pink and with the crack of gunfire, their orange-haired teammates slammed her weapon into the floor, splintering the concrete and sending it up into the air. Ren followed suit and began to unload a flurry of quick strikes into the still floating chunks, destroying them and creating a thick cloud of debris that hung in the air, greatly lowering visibility. Naruto nodded his head, seeing where the two childhood friends were going with the tactic. Hell, he had encountered several people who had used the same strategy, most notably one Zabuza Momoichi, a missing nin from Kirigakure. While he was impressed by the way they created the cover, he also knew there was a fatal flaw to their plan. Unlike Zabuza, who had mastered the art of the Serento Kiringu, silent killing technique, and was capable of tracking his quarry by sound alone, while he himself remained as quiet as a wraith, his own mist not hindering him in the slightest, both Ren and Nora would have just as hard a time tracking them through the cloud as he and Pira would for them. It was a double-edged sword. It seemed Pira had also picked up on this, seeming to be just as calm despite her reduced visibility. When he felt a shift in the air just to his right, Naruto realized too late he had forgotten one key thing that gave Rin an edge. Barely managing to dodge out of the way of a swing from the twin pistols that were Stormflower, the blonde teen cursed. Before he could even manage to warn his partner, he was quickly having to backpedal in an effort to evade the flurry of strikes aimed at him. Just as he was about to retaliate, now being able to vaguely make out the silhouette of his long-haired teammate, a bone-shattering swing from behind sent him tumbling out of the cloud of debris. Not too long after, as he lay on the floor groaning, Pira landed in a heap of pain next to him. "Ow!" the duo chorused. "Whoops, may have overdone it," a sheepishly chuckling Nora admitted as she stepped out of the now fading cloud. Shaking his head, Ren followed suit. "You think? Bah, not like the brat hasn't experienced worse. He's just being a crybaby." Kurama spoke up, having watched the 14s duke it out from off to the sides, his paws folded underneath his head as his tail lazily swayed back and forth. "Just because I can heal doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." Painfully rising to his feet, Naruto winced as he could feel bones beginning to mend back together. Reaching down, he offered a hand to Pira, who took it and slowly rose to her feet, wincing as she could feel the bruises already forming. Being the better off of the two, the blonde Jinchuriki slung one of the emerald-eyed teen's arms over his shoulder. With one hand holding her arm, his other wrapped around her waist, the pair began to limp their way out of the now destroyed arena, Ren and Nora following behind while Kurama padded alongside his container. Naruto's limp became less and less noticeable as they continued on their walk through campus, his healing factor working quickly to mend his wounds. Pira was much in the same boat, her aura working hard to numb the pain and speed up the healing process, albeit at a much slower rate than what Naruto's body was capable of. Despite that, either minded the close contact of the other. "So when did you two come up with that little plan of yours?" Naruto questioned. Nodding her head, Pira added, "It was executed well and was a good show of your teamwork." "Hee hee. It's 'cause I called him a bat," Nora cheerily answered. Having spent several months with her, Naruto and Pira were unfazed by their teammates' odd eccentricities and turned to Rin for a better explanation. Sighing, Ren explained, "We had been sparring when some dust got in my eyes. Even though I closed them, I was able to still feel where Nora was and kept on fighting." Naruto grinned. "So I was right. You use your semblance to make up for not being able to see as well, huh?" Not being the least surprised that the blonde former shinobi had figured out his little trick, Ren nodded. "Yes. I've been training with being able to sense other people's auras and have gotten good enough to use it as a sort of second eyesight ability. But you can't track inanimate objects, can you?" Pira asked curiously, surprising the others. Ren only raised a brow, slightly shocked. "Correct. Since I can only vaguely see aura, unless someone is channeling their aura through an object, it won't appear to me." "Have fun destroying another training area?" interrupted a familiar lower-toned voice, hints of sarcasm leaking through. Knowing only one person who was capable of such a tone of voice, Naruto grinned. "Not our fault they don't make him durable enough to handle our awesomeness." Smirking as she and her team waltzed up to the younger teens, Coco didn't bat an eye at their state of dress or at how intimate the blonde captain and red-haired second-in-command looked. "Awesomeness?" Real nice use of the English language there, Blondie. Throwing her a wilting glare, Naruto childishly stuck his tongue out. As the others laughed at the usual banter between the two captains, Pirad decided to be a little more friendly and waved a greeting. How are you guys doing? Just coming back from a mission? Velvet smiled and enthusiastically nodded her head. Had to help guard a build crew that was worried about grim attacks. Coco scoffed. In other words, it was a boring babysitting mission. Only a handful of young Grimm showed up and Fox and Yatsuhashi handled them. The two males of Team CFVY simply nodded their heads, keeping to their silent personas. Giggling at her captain's casual dismissal of their mission, Velvet added, Is that why we had to go shopping on our way back? Raising a brow, Coco merely replied, They were having a sale on scarves, why wouldn't we stop? Turning back to the chuckling teens of Team NNPR, Coco addressed their whiskered captain. By the way, thanks for sending some of those scroll things our way, they were extremely helpful on our mission. Shaking her head at her friend's attempt to mask her addiction, the rabbit-eared faunus added, She means they were helpful in helping her carry more during her shopping. Sighing at being outed, Coco patted Naruto on the shoulder and gave a quick two-finger salute as she and her team continued on their way. Well, we gotta go fill out our mission report. See ya around, Foxy. Both Fox and Yatsuhashi offered a short nod while Velvet cheerily waved a goodbye. Watching the group of older teens walk off, Naruto smiled. Bumping into Team CFVY was always fun, and the few joint missions they had done together were just as interesting. Luckily, none of those missions turned out like their first one those months ago, but they were still fun. Recalling the one time he saw Coco actually use her weapon, he shivered. It was no wonder that she rarely used thing as much more than a bludgeon. Finally reaching their dorm building, Team NNPR is all too happy to climb into the elevator and wait for the technological piece of machinery to take them to their floor. Considering that they were technically on vacation, they had seen it fit to use the time to go full bore and push the limits of their training. Of course, they had done an extensive amount of training before, but that was to get used to working together. Now it was time to improve and better themselves. However, none of them were really prepared for what their captain considered to be training. While they had seen some of the workouts and exercises Naruto did to keep himself in shape, they had never really seen him train. Seeing their captain, who they had thought to be a prodigy of sorts, throw himself into his training with all his mind, body, and soul, was inspiring, to say the least. It motivated them to do the same in an effort to not simply sit on their asses and depend on him to bail them out in dangerous situations. Of course, with next week being the start of their second semester at Beacon, the four young teens had wisely decided that today would be the last day of their boot camp, needing the week to rest and recuperate. Hey Pierre, and that PR! 7 groans echoed in the hallway as Yang opened with one of her terrible puns. So how long did that one take you to come up with? Naruto asked, turning around to see the 4 familiar faces of Team RWBY coming out of their own room across the way. The whole semester, Blake sassed. You guys have no sense of humor. The busted blonde huffed. Shaking his head, Naruto replied, I'm pretty sure Princess could make better jokes, and that's saying something. Hey! What's that supposed to mean? Weiss cried, indignantly. No one dared to respond, only snickering at the upset rapier wielder. Naruto patronizingly patted the shorter teen on the head, Weiss childishly swatting at the offending limb. Nothing at all, Princess. Still giggling, but trying hard not to, lest she anger her partner, Ruby spoke up. So you guys finished destroying another practice space? Sweat dropping, Naruto replied. Geez, are we really that bad? I heard that Ashpin is thinking of charging you for the repair fees if it keeps happening. Yang answered cheekily. Pira chuckled sheepishly. Well, thankfully we'll be taking it easy from now until the start of the semester. Speaking of taking it easy, Yang grinned as she slid behind Naruto and Pira. Slinging her arms around the two, she continued. Finally decided to take that step? Confused at first, Naruto and Pira blushed a deep red when they saw that Naruto's arm was still wrapped around the redhead's waist, and her arm was casually slung over his shoulders. Instantly, the two supposedly highly trained warriors turned into stuttering teens, quickly parting ways. Everyone else was more than happy to share a laugh at the expense of the pair, except for a certain raven-haired faunus. She had long since come to terms with her feelings regarding the whiskered blonde, and had made several attempts to hint at said feelings. However, Naruto was seemingly blind to all shows of affection bar the most obvious ones. Shaking herself from her thoughts, Blake refocused. Leave them be, Yang. They look tired and worn out. Yang just grinned. You're just saying that 'cause you're jealous, aren't you? Not saying anything, Blake shot her partner a withering glare and shook her head. She wouldn't deny it, but she wouldn't outright say it either. Though she may as well have, seeing as how obvious of a hint it was. Luckily, or unluckily, for her, she was dealing with Naruto, who was completely blind to the feelings of a girl who had literally stalked him, turned into a blushing, stuttering mess any time he was near, and even fainted if he got too close. Rolling her eyes, Weiss reached into the pouch on her side and drew out a slip of paper, casually tossing it to the childish blonde. Whatever, here's that glyph you wanted. I still don't get how you think it's gonna work. Pocketing the slip of paper, Naruto pulled out one of his own and held it out for the Shinii heiress to examine. Leave that to me. Oh. And here's the one I was working on before. Now standing next to the blonde, Weiss pored over the complex mass of ink writings, and nodded her head. So you used the basis of the sticking glyph. But I don't get what was added here. Taking a look at where the rapier wielder was pointing, Naruto began to chuckle. Well, that's actually the makings of one of my exploding tags. Eyebrow twitching, the white-haired teen asked the obvious. And why is that there? As the two lost themselves in their talk of archaic writings and dust manipulation, the others could only stare in confused wonder. Even after seeing this exact thing happen before, none of them could really understand the sight before them. Weiss and Naruto were like fire and ice. They bickered more than most siblings did and were by all rights, complete opposites. Seeing the two so casually chat about the complexities of their take on runes and the like was a little unnerving. Still weird for anybody else? Yang asked, feeling as if she were observing the strangest of phenomenon. A nod of heads was her only answer, the others just as put off by the scene in front of them. You guys know we can hear you, right? Weiss asked, eyebrow twitching. Before anything else could happen, Naruto interjected. Anyways, I think it's about time we get cleaned up now. Taking in the sweaty and dirty state of the members of Team NNPR, the girls of Team RWBY nodded, Blake voicing the obvious. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. As the two teams separated, Ruby paused and turned around. Oh. Naruto! Said blonde turned around and raised a brow before the younger teen continued. Are we still heading down to Vale to stop at the AH shop? Sweat dropping, Naruto admitted. Almost forgot about that. Seeing the beginnings of the very dangerous Mo pout, the former shinobi was quick to add. I'll message you after I'm done showering. Then we can head down, alright? Ruby only grinned and nodded her head in an affirmative, eager to visit her favorite store in all of Vale. Hearing giggling, Naruto turned around and raised a brow when he saw his team shaking their heads at him. Wondering what they found so funny, he asked. What? Entering their shared room, Nora was all too eager to exclaim. Ruby can get you to do anything she wants. Pouting, Naruto attempted to deny Nora's claim. No, she can't. She convinced you to buy her 3 pounds of strawberries. Ren added. Shooting his male teammate a withering glare, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki replied. I don't think you should be talking, mister. I let Nora paint my nails. Hey! I think I did a pretty good job on his nails. Nora responded. Attempting to play peacemaker, despite the grin on her face, Pyrrha interjected. Now guys, let's just get cleaned up and enjoy the rest of our summer break. Throwing himself onto his bed, situated on the far end of the room next to Pyrrha's, Naruto nodded. Pyrrha-chan is right, we've been working ourselves pretty hard. Time to enjoy our last week before the next semester. Copying her captain, Nora allowed herself to sink into her own comfy mattress that sat between Pyrrha and Ren's beds. You know, I just remembered, weren't we supposed to have bunk beds? Moving himself towards the small area table that held the pancake maker as well as his teapot, Ren was the one to answer. We would have had to, but thanks to Naruto's seals we were able to keep most of our stuff stored away, remember? So those weren't for me to store pancakes? Sighing, Ren shook his head. No, Nora, they were not for you to store pancakes in. Naruto and Pyrrha only chuckled at their teammate's odd disposition, something they had come to accept as being a huge part of who she was. Still, there were other things to do other than to lay around in their beds. After all, they still had a week to enjoy their time off from school and they were more than ready to take advantage of that. That week went by way too fast. Naruto groaned, his voice muffled due to his head being buried in his arms. Even still, his teammates easily heard him and nodded their heads in agreement. Pyrrha, despite being the most studious out of the four of them, wasn't exactly hyped after the day of classes they had and looked to be exhausted. Across from them, Team RWBY, sans their young team captain, agreed with a chorus of non-committal groans. Thankfully it was their lunch period and the teens were more than happy to take this time to lounge around in the lunch hall. Sadly, their little break was abruptly ended when RWBY suddenly appeared and slammed a binder of monstrous proportions onto the table they were gathered at, Naruto's head shooting up in alarm at the loud sound. Sisters. Friends. Weiss. RWBY paused as Weiss gave an indignant cry at being left out. 47 minutes ago, I had a dream. Yang shook her head at seeing her younger sister acting like a goofball. This ought to be good. A now alert Naruto just grinned widely, folding his arms behind his head. Well read, lay it on us. Continuing from where she had left off, RWBY stretched out her arms in a dramatic fashion. A dream that one day, the 8 of us would one day, as friends, have the most fun anyone has had. Ever. Looking at the large and overstuffed binder more closely, Weiss raised a brow. Did you steal my binder? RWBY just gave a sheepish grin. I am not a crook. Blake simply rolled her eyes and asked the obvious. What are you talking about? The young team captain cheerily declared. I am talking about starting off the semester with a bang. Grinning cheekily, Yang announced. I always kick my semesters off with a yang. Complete silence ensued. Blake gave her partner a glare. Weiss sighed and looked the other way. Naruto slammed his head back onto the table. Rin sighed, and Pira could only sweat drop. Nora. Nora wasn't a fan and tossed an apple at the blonde pun maker, managing to beam her right on the nose. Deciding to ignore the commotion around her, RWBY explained. Well, I know we all had some fun during our break, but after the day we've had, I figured it'd be fun for all of us to have one last hurrah before we really buckle down for the semester. I really don't know whether to be proud or be scared of what you have planned. Weiss added. Yang of course chose this time to grab her own apple and pitch it at Nora, who quickly ducked under the flying fruit, letting it pelt the kid behind her. Grinning deviously, the hammer wielder picked up a pie, where she got it from no one knew, and attempted to answer back. Nora's teammates watched, wide-eyed, as the baked food sailed through the air. Everything seemed to go in slow motion as, by some deus ex machina-like intervention, the pie curved and changed course. Horror, shock, and the struggle to contain uproarious laughter blossomed on everyone's face as Weiss was completely covered by whipped creamy goodness. The next few minutes was a blur of screaming, curse words, and panic with no one having any sort of clue of what was going on. It was like the lunch hall had become ground zero for some sort of war. As students ran out of the area to escape the madness, Nora began to cackle as she stood atop a precariously made tower of tables, chairs, and vending machines stacked near as high as the roof. I'm queen of the castle! I'm queen of the castle! Perched just below her, Pira stood with her arms crossed, Naruto and Rin standing vigilantly just below the red-haired teen, arms crossing their chests. Staring defiantly at the self-proclaimed queen, RWBY grasped a milk carton in her hand. Justice will be swift! Justice will be painful! It will be delicious! Her teammates rallied behind her and gave out their own war cry. Nora only pumped her fist into the air and leapt off her perch, declaring, Off with their heads! Grinning deviously, Naruto formed a familiar cross-shaped seal, several copies popping into existence. All right, men! Fire! The blonde doppelgangers gave a chorus of affirmatives before grabbing the watermelons conveniently placed on a table directly in front of them. Team RWBY, unfazed by the onslaught of flying melons, surged forward as a group. Yang! RWBY called out. Already seeing what her younger sister had in mind, the busted teen gave a cocky grin and moved ahead of her team. Bringing her arms up, the blonde delivered a vicious right hook that caused the watermelon to explode in a shower of juices. A quick jab from her left did the same for yet another melon. Punch after punch, Yang was having no problem stopping the volley of melons. Unfortunately, Naruto was an impeccable aim and managed to sneak one past her guard, the large green fruit slamming into her abdomen and sending her tumbling backwards. Knowing her partner wouldn't go down after that, Blake hopped over Yang and rolled as she hit the ground, picking up a lengthy chain of sausages. Wielding the meat chain like she would her ribbon, the raven-haired faunus lashed out at the clones standing guard, the meat somehow hitting with enough force to actually pop the shadow clones. Seemingly not bothered by the fact his clones had just been destroyed by meat slapping, Naruto moved forward and grabbed a handful of sliced pineapples. Using them like he would his shuriken, the Uzumaki Jinchuriki let the citrus slices spin through the air. Blake took this in stride, moving her chain of sausages around in a flourish, knocking the yellow discs aside with barely a show of effort. She was, however, unprepared to suddenly find Naruto within her line of vision. As such, the teen fauness could do nothing as a yard of bread was jabbed into her abdomen, sending her flying backwards. Weiss, through use of her semblance, skated across the cafeteria floor, a swordfish in hand, and aimed to skewer Naruto. Before she could actually get within the needed distance to do so, Pyrrha appeared wielding a loaf of bread equally as long as her partner's. Using said loaf, the emerald-eyed teen batted aside Weiss's strike and moved to make her own. Rolling with it, Weiss parried the strike with her fishy rapier, attempting to stab Pyrrha in the next instant. The Schnee heiress was unprepared for her opponent to suddenly leap backwards, leaving her wide open to a swift strike from Ren, who was dual-wielding a pair of leek. Leaping over her downed teammate, Ruby grabbed a nearby food tray and began to surf across the tables, her cloak flapping behind her. Ducking, she dodged under an assault from Ren. Shifting her center of balance, the young team captain performed a handstand, the food tray situated between her and the still airborne Ren. With a kick, the metal tray was shoved into Ren's face, sending him flying backwards. Quickly spinning on her hands, Ruby managed to grab another food tray and continue speeding along the tables, her momentum not having dropped in the least. Seeing the younger silver-eyed teen making a beeline for her, Pyrrha shifted her legs, took aim, and tossed her large loaf of bread, sending it spiraling through the air. Reaching under her, Ruby jumped and used the tray as a shield, saving her from getting hit by the deadly bread. In that short amount of time, Nora had fashioned herself a hammer out of a watermelon and pole. Using said weapon, the pancake addict appeared, and with a flash of pink, plowed her melon hammer into the raised food tray with enough force to send Ruby flying backwards and into a pillar. "Sis!" Yang cried out. The busted blonde was given no time to worry about her younger sibling, Naruto, appearing in front of her. It was only thanks to her years of training under her father that she was able to backflip out of the way of what could have been a vicious haymaker. Lilac eyes flickering to the sides, Yang grinned as she spotted two turkeys. Rolling to avoid a strike from Naruto's bread staff, the gifted blonde jammed her fists into the poultry, making them into something akin to boxing gloves. Bringing her fists into her chest, she began weaving around and under her fellow blonde's swings, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Thankfully, Weiss was more than happy to lend her teammates some assistance, using a ketchup bottle to create a slippery river of tomato red. Catching it too late, Naruto mentally cursed as he lost his footing. Turning, the former shinobi's electric blue eyes widened as he saw Yang with her fist cocked back and a mischievous grin on her face. "This is gonna hurt like a bic." Sensing something heading her way, Pyrrha quickly rolled out of the way of a sausage strike from Blake just in time to see her captain barrel past where she had been. She and the others winced as they watched the spiky-haired teen slam into the far wall with enough force to create a spiderweb of cracks. "Ow!" Naruto groaned as he slid down the wall. Pyrrha was the one to avenge her captain and partner, summoning up her semblance to gather up a veritable wall of soda cans. Team RWBY's jaws dropped as they were quickly beset by a literal wave of soda cans. Quickly thinking on her feet, Ruby managed to escape being buried by quickly kicking up another tray and using it and her semblance to ride across the aluminum wave. Blake used her nimble form to quickly scale a nearby pillar and perched herself atop a flagpole. Jumping up, Yang slammed her fist into a nearby table, kicking it into the air. Weiss jumped over her head and began to run across the large wooden construct, the blonde of Team RWBY right behind her. As the crest of the wave hit the table's underside, the two teens reached the edge of used the momentum to propel themselves even higher into the air. Catching the same table her sister and partner had used, Ruby was quick to reach the same height, popping up her makeshift surfboard and using it to slide across the length of the wooden ramp. Reaching below her, Blake ripped off the flag underneath her. Rolling it up, the teen fauness used it as a whip and wrapped the large length of fabric around Yang's wrist. With a tug, the Ravenet managed to pull her partner up to the same pole she was situated atop. Using her own semblance, Ruby propelled herself forward, grabbing Weiss along the way, and perching the two of them on a pole just behind the one their two teammates were crouched on. As the wave of soda cans settled, Rin called out, "Nora! Boost!" Cupping her hands, the bubbly teen faced her childhood friend. Springing forward, the long-haired male placed his foot into the cup of Nora's hands and pushed off, the hammer wielder pushing up and using her strength to propel him into the air. Thanks to the boost from Nora, Ren managed to reach the same height as the four members of Team RWBY. Reaching to his sides, the ponytailed teen revealed a pair of leeks in his hands. As gravity presented itself and Lin began to descend, he pulled back and let the leeks fly. Blake dodged the flying vegetable by allowing herself to slip off the pole. Wrapping her hands tightly around the protrusion and using the velocity from her quick fall, the raven-haired teen began to swing herself around the pole like a professional gymnast. With a few quick rotations, Blake let go of the pole at just the right time to send her rocketing towards Team NNPR's long-haired male, feet first. However, before she could reach Rin, Pyrrha sent a loaf of bread careening into the faunus abdomen with enough force to completely stop Blake's momentum. Having been stopped dead mid-flight, and having the wind knocked out of her, Blake could do nothing but fall into a pile of tables and chairs. Yang attempted to follow through with her partner's assault on the still vulnerable Rin, shoving herself off the pole with her still turkey-covered fist cocked back. Releasing a battle cry, the busted blonde brawler was a yellow missile intent on clobbering Rin. Seeing the approaching danger, and having just landed, the tea-lover managed to roll out of the way, just in time to avoid a devastating right hook from Team RWBY's close-quarters fighter. As her fist met the concrete of the floor, the tiled ground cracked under the force of the strike, while her poultry glove exploded, unable to handle the force that Yang had put into her strike. Pivoting on her foot, Yang attempted to catch Rin unawares and land a strike from her still turkey-covered left hand. However, much to her surprise and horror, instead of seeing the long black hair of her target, she was instead greeted by the smiling face of Nora. Seeing the orange-haired teen with her watermelon hammer already poised to strike, Yang could only think of one thing: this is gonna hurt. Everyone who was still conscious watched, wide-eyed, as Nora sent Yang hurtling straight through the roof with a flash of pink and an explosion of watermelon particles. Attempting to take advantage of Nora now being weaponless, Weiss skated across the ground, picking up the swordfish she had previously discarded. Just as she was about to strike out, Naruto managed to switch places with his eccentric teammate thanks to a well-timed kawarimi. Unprepared for the sudden swap, Weiss was caught flat-footed and unable to defend herself as the blonde male swept her legs out from under her. Going with his spin, Naruto reached out and grabbed a nearby club of meat. Twirling it, he slammed the hunk of meat straight into Weiss' back, sending her plowing into a pillar. As the Schnee heiress rebounded off the hard surface, Ruby appeared just in time to catch her partner. Weiss? No! The young team captain cried out, holding her fallen comrade in her arms. Laying her fallen teammate down, Ruby kicked off, quickly using her semblance to swirl into naught but a red bullet. Going at the speed she was, the aspiring huntress was quickly kicking up the soda cans Pyrrha had used previously. Seeing what the younger teen had planned, Naruto stepped forward and began to rapidly move through a sequence of hand seals. With Ruby only yards away, a streamlined trail of soda cans just behind her, Naruto inhaled, expanding his chest before exhaling a great gale of visible wind. Futon de Tapa, wind release, great breakthrough! Ruby and her trail of cans slammed full force into the wind tunnel, and for a moment, it looked like she would overcome the jutsu. However, Naruto had pumped just enough chakra into it to quickly strip the cans and Ruby of their velocity. The beverages, lacking any sort of substantial weight or force, exploded under the high pressure of the winds while Ruby simply fell on her backside, before being sent tumbling backwards like a ball. Cutting off his tie to the jutsu, Naruto grinned victoriously. However, he and the others forgot about the soda which had exploded from the cans and been caught up in the wind-natured jutsu. Without the wind to support it, the mass of sugary drinks came down like a rainstorm, covering everyone in an assortment of sticky colors. It was at this moment that Glinda Goodwitch slammed open the previously closed doors of the cafeteria, an irritated scowl on her face. Without any sort of preamble, the deputy headmistress began to wave her riding crop around, tables and chairs either floating or tumbling back into place while the floors and walls were melded back into pristine condition. With a few more short flicks of her wrist, the blonde huntress easily returned the previously war-torn lunch hall back into a spotless and organized eating space. Done with her fixes, Glinda turned to stare at the culprits with her bright green eyes. "Children, please do not play with your food." While the cafeteria was now spotless and back in order, the same could not be said for the group of teens, all of them painted in a colorful combination of soda and assorted fruit juices. Sheepishly grinning, the teens could only nod as their strict teacher admonished them. The brevity of the situation was completely shattered when, with a shout, Yang came back through the ceiling, landing atop Naruto, the two blondes breaking a table into pieces and cracking the ground underneath them. Rubbing her head, Yang let out a groan of pain. "I think I may have broken something." "Yeah, me," Naruto groaned out. Looking below her, the lilac-eyed teen's sweat dropped as she realized she was sitting on top of Naruto's stomach. Whoops! Glinda could only sigh in frustration as she watched the group of friends begin to laugh, heedless of the damage they had done. "Let it go!" came the raspy voice of Beacon's headmaster. Turning, Glinda released a sigh of frustration as she saw her friend and boss standing to her side. Turning back to look at the teens, the blonde woman only shook her head as she witnessed Nora poking and prodding a still laid out Naruto. "They're supposed to be the defenders of the world." Gazing at the teens as Yang comically refused to get up off a complaining Naruto, Ashbin replied in his usual calm tone. "And they will be. But right now, they're still children. So why not let them play the part?" Turning on his heel, the silver-haired headmaster began to make his way out of the building, leaving with one last comment. "After all, it isn't a role that they'll have forever." Unknown to him, a certain Biju had overheard the conversation, having opted to stay out of the food fight. Gazing at the headmaster, Kurama scoffed, "This era will never know the horrors that this world has seen, so do not act like you know what bloodshed over territory, power, and greed looks like. I have seen whole villages and armies laid to waste by a single man. The likes of Hashirama, Madara, and even the Gaki's father will never be seen again." Turning his gaze to see his container laughing and smiling, the QB continued his internal monologue. "Naruto is truly the last of his kind, a human apart from even the shinobi of our time, capable of changing entire landscapes with a single technique." Huffing, the chakra entity allowed a small grin to spread across his muzzle as he watched the blonde Uzumaki. "And that may be for the best. This time has no need of men like them anymore. Naruto will finish what he and those before him started, and that will be the end of it. Even you know that, don't you, Ashbin?" Freshly showered and casually dressed in their pajamas, the group of 8 friends found themselves comfortably relaxing in Team NPR's room, something they had been doing on a regular basis. As per the usual, Blake and Rin were enjoying some of the pistol user's tea. Naruto was sat on his bed with Kurama curled up in his lap and Yang on the edge of his bed. Ruby had claimed the edge of Pira's bed, Weiss had taken up the only chair in the room, and Nora laid out on her own bed. "I still say we would have so one," Yang commented. Grinning, Naruto replied, "I don't know, sure looked like me and my team had kicked your guys' butts pretty good." Rising to stand on Naruto's bed, Yang began to stretch her arms. "You want another go, Foxy?" The shinobi-turned-huntsman rose to the challenge. "Just because you got a lucky shot and before doesn't mean it'll happen again." Shaking her head at the antics of the two blondes, Pira interjected. Now you two, no need to turn our room into a war zone." "Ah, but I had 10 lean on Captain Whiskers," Nora cried. Ignoring their teammates, Naruto and Yang began to wrestle, rolling off his bed in the process causing Kurama to jump onto Pira's lap. Ruby decided to throw in her 2 cents. "Well, Yang is really good at punching stuff." As if on cue, a cry of pain came from the side of Naruto's bed, Yang's head poking up as she cheered victoriously. Nodding, Ren agreed. "True, but Naruto is as stubborn as an ox and can take a beating and keep going." Yang cried out in surprise as Naruto pounced on her, starting their little match all over. "Yeah, but Yang only gets stronger the more damage she takes," Blake added in attempt to defend her partner. The grappling blondes rolled into a nearby nightstand, knocking over a pile of scrolls and papers. "But Naruto has way more experience and his jutsu." Pira jumped into the debate over which of the blondes was the stronger fighter. Yang flipped Naruto over, locking the Jinchuriki into a full Nelson. Weiss, while not at all interested in the current conversation, did care for the image of her team. "He needs time to use his jutsu, and Yang is pretty quick on her feet, she wouldn't give him the time to use them." Naruto somehow managed to squirm his way out of the hold, turning the tables on Yang and locking her into an armbar. "Naruto has that cool fox thingy though." Nora, being one responsible for the debate, chimed in. Pira nodded. "Right, he also has his sage mode, which makes him stronger than even Nora." "Wait, so he has another transformation technique?" Ruby inquired. Everyone turned, only to sweat drop as they saw Naruto and Yang tangled into a mess of limbs, their faces comically squished together. "Come on, Foxy, you know you want to tap out." Yang bit out. Growling, the whiskered teen replied, "Not a chance, firecracker." Weiss sighed in frustration. "Why am I friends with these people?" "Alright, you two, Ruby has a question." Pira called over the ruckus, playing the peacemaker. "What's up, Red?" Naruto asked. Taking advantage of the opening, Yang managed to roll herself on top of Naruto's back, grabbing both of his arms and pulling on them. Well, Pyrrha said something about you having another transformation thing. RWBY stated simply. Oh. My sage mode, yeah, I'll show you. Taking a deep breath, Naruto closed his eyes and seemed to block out the rest of the world, even Yang, who was still on his back pulling on his arms. It was a little odd for the others to see the normally hyperactive blonde take on such a serene look. Pyrrha, however, having been explained what sage mode was back during their excursion to Yuzugakure, only smiled. To everyone's surprise, Naruto's eyes snapped open, revealing a pair of honey brown, almost dark amber, colored orbs. The pupil now an all-black slit that made the eyes resemble that of feline or fox. Seemingly as if he was flicking off a fly, Naruto rose to his feet, sending Yang onto the floor. Despite knowing that this was the same blonde who had pranked Carden several times and was more often than not stuffing his face with ramen, the aura around him felt completely different. Naruto's steadfast belief in his friends and his never-say-die attitude were infectious, and the same could be said for his bouts of hyperactivity. However, this new feeling was something else entirely. It was as if they had been wrapped up in the warmest, most plush blanket ever made. Every single part of them was completely at ease. Happy memories of safer, more childish times flashed through each of their minds, lulling them further into a sense of security. This feels completely different from when you used that fox cloak thing, Ren commented. Releasing his control over the power, Naruto's eyes bled back into their normal sapphires. Well, it's a completely different kind of energy, so it should be. Yeah, when you turned into that fox, it felt like I was being drowned in a sea of hatred and malice, like I should get as far away as possible. Blake began. Knowing of his harsh past due to that same power, the raven-haired teen was quick to continue. The only reason I didn't was because I knew it was you and that you'd never hurt any of us. Slinging an arm around her fellow blonde's shoulders, Yang nodded sagely. Yeah, you can be pretty scary sometimes, Foxy, but we wouldn't have you any other way. Nora shrugged. I don't know, it was pretty cool when he did that thing with his hand and crushed the bullhead. He was all like Ruhr. Fear me. The group of teens shared a laugh at the antics of the eccentric teen. So, how goes your little plan to convince that blonde brat to work with us? Torchwick asked sardonically. Lounging in a chair with one of her slender legs crossed over the other, Cinder only smirked. Slow, but progress has been made. It seems those last few presents I gave him are quite the incentive. Lighting up a cigar, the flame-haired crime boss raised a brow. What, you mean those stupid little rings? Why would he want some old pieces of jewelry? Gonna propose to some girl? The femme fatale rubbed the bridge of her nose in frustration. No, those rings are incredibly significant to him, and if we manage to find the remaining 6, he may just well owe us a favor, and if there's anything I've come to learn about him, Naruto will do everything in his power to fulfill a promise. Torchwick only sneered. Still don't get why we don't just kill him. As it is, he's already set us back by a few weeks. Cinder let out a quiet, yet still mocking, laugh. If you believe yourself capable of killing him, you are more than welcome to try. But allow me to remind you of the power you yourself saw and know that's not even close to the amount he keeps leashed up. Gee, didn't know you cared. Torchwick bit out. The raising of a delicate brow was his response. Don't delude yourself, Roman. You have been a very helpful player in my plan, but do not believe yourself irreplaceable. What I am more concerned about is the devastation Naruto will bring down if you anger him. It wouldn't do well for my plans if a chunk of Veil was destroyed because of your folly. Without even waiting for a response, Cinder turned on her heel and began to saunter out. Oh, and begin packing. We're beginning phase 2. When the ebony-haired woman was well out of earshot, Torchwick scoffed. Destroy half of Veil? Brat's strong, but not that strong. And just remember, you were the one who said I could try. Oh, make number 5, prank king and queen, Carden Winchester smirked. It was the first day of the new semester. He and his team standing in their class ranking had risen, no random embarrassing accidents had befallen him, and everybody seemed to finally be forgetting about his match against that irritating blonde. Things were finally looking up for the captain of Team CRDL. Slipping on his freshly polished armor, Carden strutted out of his dorm and began to make his way to his first class of the day. However, the teen began to notice a strange thing happening around him. For some odd reason, as he passed people, they would either begin to laugh or whisper to each other, their looks centered on him. Raising a brow, he decided to shrug it off. They students of Beacon were a strange bunch after all. Walking into the arena Glinda Good which had designated for their class, The entire group of teens could not help themselves and erupted into a cacophony of laughter and pointing upon seeing the short-haired male. "What is wrong with all of you?" Carden shouted, fed up with all laughter. "Mr. Winchester! I have no idea what made you think this was okay, but allow me to set you straight. Clothing must be worn at all times outside of your dorm," Glinda exclaimed. Confused, Carden looked down only to gape in horror. Somehow, where once there had been a set of freshly polished armor was now only his bare skin. The worst part was that the only thing blocking the more intimate parts of his anatomy from being on display was a pair of bright pink boxers with the word, "Saucy," bedazzled onto the backside, a winky face of the same fake jewels embedded to the side. "Why?" Carden began to stutter out, unable to comprehend how this had happened without his noticing. "Public indecency is against this academy's rules, Mr. Winchester. Come with me so we may decide your punishment," Glinda growled out, a look of barely restrained fury burning in her bright green orbs. A still bewildered Carden was forcibly led out of the arena, the other students still laughing, many of them now in tears and gasping for air. Amongst the roar of hysterics, a grinning Jinchuriki high-fived an innocent-looking heterochromatic-eyed teen. Wiping the tears from her eyes, Yang addressed the culprits. "How did you two manage that?" Naruto only whistled innocently. "Manage what, firecracker? I have no idea what you're talking about. Me and Neo were here the whole time." "That was terrible!" RWBY exclaimed, eyes still watering from laughing so hard. Of course, while she tried her hardest to seem disappointed, she not so discreetly slipped Naruto a congratulatory low five. As Glinda walked back into the arena, a look of anger still etched into her face, the teens all attempted to quell their laughter, though some could not help the few stray chuckles that escaped as the deputy headmistress began her lesson. It was on this day that the crowned prank king of Konoha now Beacon gained an equally mischievous accomplice, a queen to his king. Not many could quite say how the partnership began, only that those targeted by the two would be left scarred and embarrassed. Poor Carden did not know the horrors that would befall him in the coming semester, but popular opinion would be that he deserved it.